Before I knew it, a lot of time had passed, and I saw the sun setting. I told my daughter it was time to leave the water. Suddenly, I had a bad feeling about what was happening. My husband Bill and my mother-in-law Lily's bags were gone. Then I heard the sound of a boat's engine. What was going on? To my surprise, Bill had gotten on the boat and left me and my daughter by the shore. "Hey, why are you leaving us?" I swam toward the boat in a panic, but even though it was small, I couldn't catch up. I might have hurt myself if I tried. "It's fine, we're not really related by blood, so it doesn't matter," I heard Bill say. I was shocked when I got close to the boat. Then Lily looked at me from the boat and laughed, saying, "Ha, look at that stupid face." Bill looked at me with disgust, and then the boat sailed away, leaving my daughter and me behind. My name is Lauren, I'm 32 years old, and I'm a housewife. I live with my husband Bill and our 7-year-old daughter Jessica. Jessica works hard in her studies, sports, and piano lessons. She's been playing the piano since she was 5. Jessica is so cute, and she means everything to me. Life with her is full of happiness, but things weren't going well with Bill. Bill and I met about 10 years ago. I started working at a company, and Bill, who was 2 years older, became my trainer. I was attracted to him because he worked hard and was always kind and helpful to me. We got closer and eventually started dating. After 2 years, we got married. Our early years of marriage were wonderful. Bill took great care of me, and I knew he loved me. When Jessica was born, Bill said, "She's like an angel," and adored her. I thought he would be so protective of her forever, even to the point where I imagined he might faint if she ever talked about getting married. But when Jessica was about 2, Bill suddenly changed. He became cold and distant, and stopped showing any interest in me or our daughter. I didn't understand what was happening. He wouldn't talk to me, and he didn't even want to hold or talk to Jessica. After about a month of this, I couldn't take it anymore, so I confronted him. "Why are you acting like this? Did I do something wrong? Why are you ignoring me and Jessica? I don't understand, and it's really bothering me." Bill calmly responded, "Because that child isn't mine." "What?" I couldn't understand what he meant. "Jessica is our child." "What are you talking about? Jessica is definitely your daughter," I told him, but he wouldn't listen. Bill said, "She doesn't look like me at all." I replied, "That's not true, she's only 2, and she'll probably look more like you as she gets older." Bill said, "No, she has green eyes, and they're big. I have blue eyes, so there's no way she's my daughter." I was shocked by his reasoning. I said, "Wait, I have green eyes, too, so Jessica must have the same eyes as me." Bill looked like he was starting to believe me, but his pride wouldn't let him fully accept it. "You're just trying to fool me," he said. "That's not true, you have to believe me," I insisted. Eventually, Bill wanted time to think, so he went to his parents' house. That's when I started doubting him and wondering if we could really have a proper family. After Bill talked to his parents, Lily called me and cursed at me, saying, "EW." Then my in-laws and I had a serious talk, and we decided to do a DNA test to settle things once and for all. Bill said, "We don't need a test. I know she's not my daughter," but when I insisted on the test, he agreed. The results came back showing that Jessica was his daughter. Bill looked at me in disbelief and said, "You've got to be kidding me." My father-in-law Pete then said, "The test results are clear. Why don't you admit it and apologize to Lauren?" Pete yelled at Bill, and Bill finally came to his senses. "Lauren, I'm sorry I doubted you. I don't know what got into me," Bill said, bowing his head. I forgave him for now. Some people might have divorced him right away, but I was a housewife at the time and didn't make much money. I didn't want to take Jessica's dad away from her, especially since she was only 2 years old. Besides, we had fallen in love before we got married, and I didn't want to divorce him just like that. But later, I regretted not divorcing Bill at that time. Life with Bill was a bit awkward after that, but we started talking more, and for a while, things felt normal again. Still, Bill couldn't bond with Jessica. When I would say, "Come on, Bill, play with her," he'd reply, yeah, but it always felt uncomfortable. He would play for a short time, then say, "I think moms are better at this," and hand Jessica back to me. As Jessica grew, Bill hardly ever played with her. When she was about 5, she was curious and loved asking questions. She read a lot and always came to me when she didn't understand something. One day, she asked me a history question. Since Bill was great at history, I told her to ask him. So, Jessica ran up to Bill and asked him the question. I tried my best to help Bill get closer to Jessica, but he still turned her away, saying, "You'd get a better answer if you ask your mother." Jessica looked confused and asked, "Well, who should I ask?" I went over to Bill and said, "Jessica is asking you, so you should pay attention to her." Bill replied, "You're here to handle this stuff, so if you're here, there's no need for me." I was shocked to hear him say that. I couldn't understand why he didn't want to spend time with Jessica. She seemed a little lonely because he wasn't there for her. I tried to find ways to bring our family closer, but Bill wouldn't make time for us. Jessica worked hard at piano and studying, partly because she wanted her dad to notice her. My frustration with Bill grew, and one night, I snapped. "That's enough. Why are you avoiding Jessica? She's trying so hard to connect with you. You haven't even come to her piano recital once." Even when I was angry, it felt like Bill just didn't want to do anything for her. He calmly said, "I'm letting her do whatever she wants, so I'm doing my job as a father." "You're too cold to your own daughter," I yelled, but Bill responded, "I wonder if she's really my child." "What? What are you talking about? We did the DNA test," I said, but Bill still seemed unconvinced and went back to his room. I didn't know how to make Bill change his mind. Then, out of nowhere, Bill suggested, "Let's go on a trip to Hawaii with the whole family." I was happy because it seemed like he was finally making time for us, and Jessica would be able to make happy memories with her dad. When we got there, Bill told me he had booked a boat and took me and Jessica to the port. The boat was small but beautiful, and we were excited for the day ahead. Bill even had a boat driving license, so we planned to visit a nearby deserted island. My father-in-law Pete didn't come because he wanted to buy something and visit a friend. So, it was just me, Bill, Lily, and Jessica heading to the island. The island was beautiful, and Jessica loved it. Bill had brought snorkeling gear, and he dived into the water by himself at first. Then he invited Jessica and me to join him. I put on my gear and dove in, like I had before. It was Jessica's first time, so Bill carefully taught her. I was so happy to see Bill finally acting like a dad. Jessica seemed happy too, and soon she was getting the hang of it. Bill said, "I'm going to take a break," and got out of the water. I stayed in the water with Jessica to make sure she was safe and had fun. Before I knew it, time had passed, and the sun was setting. I told Jessica it was time to leave the sea. That's when I started to feel uneasy. Bill and Lily's luggage were gone, and I heard the sound of a boat's engine. I couldn't believe it. Bill had gotten on the boat and left me and Jessica behind. "Hey, why are you leaving us?" I swam toward the boat in a panic, but even though it was small, I couldn't catch up. I worried that I might hurt myself if I tried. Then I heard Bill say, "It's not like we're related by blood anyways, so this is fine." I was stunned. Then Lily appeared on the boat and laughed, saying, "Huh, look at that dumb face." Bill looked at me with disgust, and then the boat left us stranded on the island. I quickly swam back to the island and ran to Jessica, who looked terrified. "Are we stuck here?" she asked. I hugged her, telling her everything would be okay, even though I was scared too. Being stranded on a deserted island felt hopeless. Luckily, I had some portable food in my bag, which could last us a day or two, but not much longer. I kept hoping someone would notice us. With Jessica there, I was able to stay calm. "Let's warm up for now. We could catch a cold from being wet after snorkeling," I said. I dried Jessica off with the towel I had brought and dressed her. Then, we gathered thin tree branches and dry leaves to make a fire. I was grateful I had brought a lighter. When I lit the fire, the flames slowly spread to the leaves and branches, warming us up. But what if no one came to help? I couldn't stop feeling anxious. About 2 hours after Bill left us, a small boat appeared. I quickly stood up, waved my hands, and shouted, "Help," over and over. The boat stopped near us, and the man on board came over. "Are you okay?" he called, motioning for us to get on the boat. The man worked for the boat shop that rented the boat to Bill. As we got in the boat, he explained that after Bill returned the boat, he noticed something wasn't right. Bill and Lily had left, but he realized the number of people didn't match, so he became worried and came to check on us. I was so relieved, I burst into tears. Jessica had fallen asleep in my arms, probably exhausted from the fear. We safely returned to the hotel, and after thanking the people who helped us, Jessica and I went back inside. In the hotel lobby, I met Pete. "Oh, Lauren, where's my son and wife?" he asked, coming over to me. When he saw how tired I looked, he immediately knew something was wrong. "Let's sit down in the lounge," he said. We sat, and I told him what had happened, how we were left behind and how Bill had been distant with Jessica for a long time. After hearing me out, Pete bowed his head and apologized. He said he would never forgive what Bill and Lily had done to us. Pete had always been the one to stand up for me when Bill doubted that Jessica was his daughter. He loved his granddaughter deeply and was the only one who truly cared about us. Pete said, "Let's teach them a lesson." I agreed with Pete's plan and went with him to the hotel front desk. Luckily, Bill and Lily hadn't come back to the hotel yet, probably because they were having dinner. Since I made the reservation, I canceled our stay, meaning Bill and Lily wouldn't be able to stay there. Pete was planning to stay at his friend's house nearby, so he took Jessica and me there. His friend and his wife welcomed us with open arms. By the time we arrived, Jessica had woken up and was enjoying a warm, homemade meal. Then, I got a call saying that Bill and Lily had been caught by the police. They had caused a scene at the hotel because they couldn't check in. The hotel staff had called the police, and when the police arrived, they were aggressive and said, "We made a reservation." Bill and Lily were upset, but when you don't listen to the police, it leads to trouble. They asked Pete and me for help, but we refused. I told the police everything, how Bill and Lily had left us stranded on the island. The police also took statements from the boat staff as evidence. As a result, Bill and Lily were charged with a crime. Bill, in panic, hired a lawyer and had to pay a huge amount for bail, losing a lot of money. They were both in jail for a few days before being released. It was a huge blow to them, both financially and emotionally. It felt good to get back at them, especially because if the boat staff hadn't come, Jessica and I would have suffered much worse. Jessica and I returned home first, packed up our things, and went to my parents' house. Bill soon arrived with divorce papers through my lawyer and demanded alimony for the emotional distress he caused us. I asked him, through my lawyer, why he treated his daughter this way. Bill said that once he doubted that Jessica was his. He lost all love for her. I was shocked and heartbroken. Even after a DNA test confirmed Jessica was his daughter, he still couldn't believe it. I regretted not separating Jessica from him earlier. After the divorce, Bill had to pay alimony and child support, which put him in debt. I also reported what had happened to my old boss, and soon, everyone at Bill's company knew what he had done. He became known as the man who tried to abandon his wife and child. Now, he's full of shame. Meanwhile, Pete divorced Lily because of her actions. She, who had been living off Pete's salary, was left without a job. She tried to get help from Bill, but he refused because he couldn't afford it. Now, she's living in a rundown apartment and working part-time. As for me, I found a new job, rented a small apartment for Jessica and me, and started a new life. Jessica no longer thinks of Bill as her father. She gives all her love to me, practicing the piano every day. She says, "I'm going to win the next competition for you, Mommy. I'll work hard and earn money so I can help you with everything you love." Leaving us on the deserted island was definitely a crime, and I think Bill and Lily should be in jail for what they did, but I'm thankful Pete was a good person who helped us. I hope Lauren and Jessica will keep finding happiness together. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video. Hello, my name is Michelle, and I'm 63 years old. My husband passed away about 6 years ago, but I'm still working. I have 2 children, and 5 of my grandkids live in different states across the country. They each have their own families, and I feel truly blessed to have such a large family. One of my kids, Kyle, still lives in our hometown. He went to the local community college where he met his wife, Julie. I liked Julie well enough, but I didn't feel my opinion mattered as long as Kyle was happy. They got married shortly after and continued their education, each pursuing careers in their fields. Once they were both settled in their jobs, they decided to start a family, and I was thrilled at the thought of having another grandchild to spoil. However, Julie set strict boundaries when it came to visits. She controlled when I could visit and how long I could stay. While I understood this when Daniel, their first child, was a baby, it never really changed, even when he was 5. I tried not to let it bother me, thinking every family is different. Over the next 15 years, I didn't get to spend as much time with Daniel as I would have liked. We never grew as close as I had hoped, but we did share a love for books, so I always bought him books when I visited. One day at work, I received an unexpected call from Daniel. This was unusual, since we rarely spoke outside of family gatherings. I did my best to connect with him, as I had with my other grandchildren, but he seemed distant. "Grandma, are you free to talk?" he asked. "Of course, honey, anytime." "Is everything okay?" "No, no." "Why are you crying? Did you get hurt? Is anyone at home who can help you?" "Mom and Dad are here, but, do you need me to call them for you?" "No. I called you because I need your help." "My help? What's going on, darling?" "I need you to save me, Grandma." "Save you? What do you mean? She's not as sweet and nice as she acts. She's really mean to me when no one else is around." Suddenly, I heard someone coming up the stairs. "I have to go. Please don't tell them I called." "Bye." I was left shocked and confused. As far as I knew, Julie was one of the kindest people. How could Daniel say such things about her? I didn't want to believe him at first. Maybe he was upset over something like being grounded. Daniel had always been a bit mischievous, according to both Julie and Kyle. But something in my gut told me he wasn't joking. The call haunted me for days, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. After some time, I decided to buy a hidden camera. I felt uneasy about spying, but I convinced myself that if Daniel trusted me enough to call, I owed it to him to help. If I found nothing, I'd just remove the camera. But if there was something wrong, I'd figure out what to do next. I hoped it would be a simple misunderstanding, and a long talk would set everything right. The camera arrived a few days later, and I set it up, glad to see it had both live and recorded footage that I could access through an app on my phone. After making sure everything was in place, I called Kyle. "Hello, sweetie. How's everything?" "Everything's great, Mom. What about you?" Same old, same old. I was wondering if I could come by one day. We haven't seen each other in a while." "Of course. How about this Sunday?" "That works, but should I check with Julie if it's okay? I used to hate it when Dad made plans without asking me. But don't worry, Julie will be happy to have you over." "See you then, Mom. I'll be there around 6 o'clock. I was glad to be going to Kyle's, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had other motives now. I was still excited to spend time with my son. It wasn't often that I got to see my family, so it felt special to have one of my children living in the same town. The weekend arrived quickly, and I made sure to get ready early. I decided to bring something along, so I went to the grocery store to pick up a nice bottle of wine and bought a couple of books for Daniel, knowing how much he loved to read. When I arrived at Kyle's house, I was warmly greeted by all three of them. But it was Daniel's look that caught my attention. He stared at me with such a sense of relief that I couldn't help but feel concerned again. Since that first phone call, I hadn't heard from him, so I had no idea what was going on. I spent the next couple of hours chatting with Kyle and Julie. We had dinner, drank wine, and enjoyed each other's company. At some point, Daniel excused himself and went to his room, likely because we were talking about things that didn't interest him. I decided to go and spend time with him. Julie tried to subtly stop me, but I insisted. I hadn't visited in a long time, and I wanted to spend some one-on-one time with my grandson. Kyle told Julie to let me go, and I headed up to Daniel's room. Once inside, I closed the door behind me. I walked over to him and handed him the books I had brought. We talked about them for a while, and since he seemed excited, I let him ramble on. I didn't bring up what he had mentioned during our phone call earlier. I wanted him to talk about it if he was ready, not push him. Our conversation shifted to other topics, like what was going on in our lives. While he was telling me about his school and other things, he grabbed a notebook and wrote something in it. When he showed it to me, it said, "Mom's listening. Can't talk about anything." I couldn't tell if he was serious or just paranoid, but I went along with it. We continued talking, and I quietly wrote my plan in the notebook. I told him I had brought a hidden camera and asked if I could set it up in his room. He quickly agreed. I found a good spot to place the camera, one that gave me a clear view of the room. After starting the recording, I checked my phone to make sure the camera was working. I sat with Daniel a little longer, then told him it was getting late and I needed to head home. Before leaving, I purposely left my scarf behind as an excuse to return if needed. As I headed downstairs, I heard footsteps quickly moving away from the door, which made me wonder if Daniel was right all along. I hugged him goodbye, said my farewells to Kyle and Julie, and then went home. That night, I was tired but couldn't resist checking the footage from the camera. I stayed up for an hour, watching it, just in case something happened. Kyle walked into Daniel's room and asked what we had talked about, and Daniel told him. That was it. I finally went to bed, exhausted from the day. The next morning, I rushed to work and didn't check the camera again until I knew Daniel would be back from school. Again, there was nothing of concern, and I started to think maybe Daniel had been lying, but I decided to give it one more day. If I didn't find anything, I would visit when neither Kyle nor Julie was home and ask Daniel to give me the camera back. That night, as I watched the footage while reading, I finally discovered what Daniel had been trying to tell me. Julie entered the room with a stick in her hand, with Kyle following behind her. I quickly unmuted the video. Julie asked Daniel what he had done all day and made him describe everything in extreme detail. Whenever he stuttered, she sharply asked if he was lying. If she suspected he was, she made him hold out his palms and hit his knuckles 3 to 5 times with the stick. I watched in growing horror as Julie hit Daniel more and more frequently. Daniel was sobbing, and Kyle just stood there, watching. I was filled with a deep sense of disappointment and disgust. I had raised my children gently, believing that kids are smarter than we often give them credit for. They can understand when things are explained to them. I couldn't understand why Kyle just stood by, letting his son get hit for no reason. I wanted to rush over and stop them, but what would I say? It would be strange for me to show up again, just a day after my last visit. Then I remembered that I had left my scarf there, which could be the perfect excuse to go back, but I needed to wait another day, to make sure I could see Daniel again. I quickly grabbed my phone and called Kyle. Hey, Mom, is everything okay? Yes, no worries. I hope I'm not disturbing you. No, Julie and I were just saying goodnight to Daniel. Alright then, I just wanted to tell you that I think I left my scarf in Daniel's room last night. I remember setting it down and forgot to pick it up. Do you think I could swing by tomorrow to grab it? Why don't I just bring it over now? No, I'm too tired. I'm about to fall asleep. It's been a long day at work, and I can barely hold the phone right now. Alright then, how about tomorrow evening? I can't. I have a game night with friends tomorrow. Well, Julie and I won't be back until the evening. Why don't you come by the day after? I really need that scarf for tomorrow. We're having a gathering. Okay, you could come by in the afternoon. Daniel will be home. Lovely, I'll be there around 3. Good night, Mom. My heart raced as I ended the call. I'd come up with a lie on the spot, but at least my call had distracted Kyle and Julie enough for them to focus on what I said rather than continuing to hurt Daniel. Before they left Daniel's room, I heard Julie tell him that he wouldn't be getting any food until dinner the next day. I was appalled, but sadly, I knew they would follow through with it. The next day, I took the day off from work and prepared myself for the conversation with Daniel. I was sure he wouldn't want to stay there, but I needed to hear it from him. I stopped to pick up some food on the way over. When I arrived, Daniel looked like he might faint. He was weak and exhausted. Julie had really made him go without food. I quickly gave him the food, and he devoured it, eating with a desperation that broke my heart. I felt so sorry for him, but I knew I had to help make things better. When he finished eating, I spoke to him softly. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Did you see everything that happened? Yes, darling. I'm so sorry I didn't know. I had no idea. It's okay. Mom seems like the nicest person, but has she always been this way? The beatings only started recently, but the starving has been going on for a while. I don't understand why Kyle isn't doing anything. He's too scared of Mom. He just follows her, does everything she says, everything she wants, she gets. Honey, I'm so sorry you've been dealing with this, but I need to understand. Why didn't you eat anything at school? Mom doesn't send me to school on days she doesn't let me eat. I stay home. Mom measures the food in the house, and if even a little bit is missing when she gets back, I get punished more. So she's starving you and hurting your education? I'm going to do my best to help you, okay? I need you to tell me right now, if you want to come live with me. I'll take care of everything, and I'll keep you away from Mom and Dad. Of course, Grandma, anywhere away from here would be great. I promise I'll be good, just please take me away. I promise I will, darling, but it'll take some time. Can you handle staying here a little longer? Yeah, I can. I've been here for 15 years, so I can wait a bit more. I carefully took away all the wrappers and made sure there were no traces of food left behind. I didn't want Julie to make things worse for Daniel. We cleaned up the crumbs and double-checked the room to make sure it looked just as it had before. Afterward, I went home and called Kyle to thank him for being cooperative and letting me pick up my scarf. I reached out to a good friend who worked in family law and explained the situation. He told me that fighting for custody would be a long, difficult battle. While I might be able to secure temporary custody, Julie could change her behavior and regain custody with little evidence. It seemed that the odds were against me, but I had a plan. I could use the evidence I had gathered to make Julie agree to let me become Daniel's legal guardian. Julie worked as a counselor at a middle school, and I knew she wouldn't want her child abuse becoming public, as it would ruin her career prospects. I continued to monitor the footage carefully, gathering more evidence and preparing the necessary paperwork for a guardianship transfer. I waited until the weekend to visit Kyle without giving notice. When Kyle opened the door, he seemed surprised. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you." Julie appeared at the top of the stairs, and Kyle hesitated. "I don't think now's a good time." "Why, what's going on?" "Just family stuff." "Why are you suddenly visiting so often? Can't I visit my son?" "I didn't think I needed special permission for that." "No, I didn't mean it like that. It's just that you've taken an interest in us this week, and it's a bit weird since you rarely drop by." "It's not weird. I only came over today because I have something very important to talk about with you both." As we spoke, I heard loud crying coming from Daniel's room. I could tell something was wrong, so I pushed past Kyle and entered the house. I couldn't just stand by. I rushed straight to Daniel's room. Bursting through the door, Daniel was sobbing, clutching his face, while Julie stood there, breathing heavily, glaring at him with such malice that it sent a shiver down my spine. I immediately ran to Daniel and asked if he was okay. He hugged me tightly and wailed into my ear. Julie huffed and walked away without saying a word. As Daniel calmed down, I saw his cheek was red and swollen, his knuckles were bleeding, and there were welts on his arms from the stick. A deep rage built inside me. How could anyone hit a child so violently? No child deserved that. I went downstairs to the kitchen, grabbed a bag of frozen veggies, and brought it back to Daniel to help reduce the swelling on his cheek. Once he seemed stable, I told him that I would take him with me. I asked him to pack as many things as he could, and then I went downstairs to confront Julie and Kyle. Julie looked furious, and Kyle seemed like he wanted to disappear. "How dare you barge into our home like this?" "Well, isn't it a good thing I did? You were hitting your child. What happens in my family is none of your business. Your child is my grandson, and he's part of my family too. You're hurting him, and I can't let that continue. He may be your grandson, but you don't live with him. You don't know what a brat he is. I'm just disciplining him." "Who cares if he's a brat? He's a child, and there are many other ways to discipline a child without hitting them. You of all people should know this." "I don't believe in that gentle parenting nonsense. Leave me and my family alone." "I'm afraid I can't do that." I handed Julie the papers to transfer guardianship to me. Both she and Kyle stared at the papers, confused. "You both have to sign, or I'll release proof of you hitting Daniel." "What do you mean by proof?" "I set up a hidden camera in Daniel's room last week. I have all the proof I need. Neither of your jobs will appreciate what you've done, especially you, Julie. If you want to keep your career intact, I suggest you sign those papers." "You were spying on us? That's a gross violation of our privacy." "I only acted on information I had. I needed to make sure Daniel was safe." "Mom, don't do this to us. Give us another chance. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again." "I don't want to hear it. I'm very disappointed in you, Kyle. I raised you to be better than this. You're just as guilty as Julie, if not more. I'm taking Daniel with me, and I expect these papers to be signed. If not, you know what will happen." They didn't put up a fight. As Daniel and I left, I took him to get dinner and ice cream, trying my best to comfort him. I gave him a safe space to share his feelings without fear. In the following weeks, I was granted legal guardianship of Daniel. Julie and Kyle claimed they planned to move to a different state and didn't want to disrupt Daniel's education, which they used as the reason for transferring guardianship. They did end up moving, and I was relieved. Daniel is doing much better now. He's happier knowing he won't run into his parents for a long time. He's one of the kindest and sweetest kids I know, and he thanks me every day for what I did for him. I intend to keep my promise to always protect him. Thank you for listening.
I never intended to hide my success. Life has an uncanny way of revealing people's true colors when they believe you have nothing to offer. My name is Emma Chin, and I've always known that appearances can deceive. Growing up in a modest apartment above my parents' tiny grocery store in San Francisco's Chinatown, I watched them pour their lives into 14-hour workdays just to ensure there was food on our table and a chance for me to succeed. Their lessons shaped me. True worth isn't measured by wealth, but by character and determination. Emma, mai tin du shaiksin dijihui, my mother would say every morning as she straightened my collar, her hands worn from labor but tender as silk. Each day is a new opportunity. While my peers were playing video games or watching TV, I was helping stock shelves, learning inventory management, and poring over accounting books. My father's old calculator became my toy, and numbers my steadfast companion. But beyond the math, I absorbed the ethos of their work. Respect every customer, no matter what they could afford. Treat everyone like family, my father would say. You never know their story. Their sacrifices bore fruit when I earned a full scholarship to Stanford's business school. The day I received my acceptance letter, my mother cried, and my father closed the store early for the first time in 2 decades. We celebrated with a feast of dumplings and my mother's special red bean soup. At Stanford, I worked relentlessly, channeling the grit my parents had instilled in me. Between classes, I developed an innovative supply chain management system that caught the eye of Genesis Tech, a rising Silicon Valley powerhouse. Your algorithm could transform global distribution, Marcus Sterling, their CEO, said during my final presentation. We'd love for you to join us after graduation. The offer was beyond anything I'd imagined, a senior position with significant stock options. But I surprised Marcus by requesting to start in operations instead, learning the business from the ground up, just like I had in my parents' store. Most people want to start at the top, Marcus remarked, his curiosity piqued. I want to earn it, I replied. How can I lead if I don't understand the foundations? Impressed, he agreed. Officially, I was Senior Vice President of Operations, but few colleagues knew my true title, a secret I preferred. That's how I met James. One rainy Tuesday morning in the company cafeteria, I was immersed in inventory reports when someone jostled my table, nearly spilling my coffee. Oh no, I'm so sorry. A tall man with kind eyes and a crooked tie scrambled to steady the cup. I swear, I'm usually more coordinated. Laughing, I replied, no harm done. I'm Emma. James Wilson. His warm smile tugged at something in me. Let me make it up to you. Coffee's on me. One coffee led to lunch, then dinner, and soon we were inseparable. James worked in marketing, his creative flair complementing my analytical nature. He loved hearing about my work in operations, always curious about my day. You don't just see problems, he said one evening as we strolled along the bay. You see solutions. When he proposed 6 months later, I said yes without hesitation. It wasn't until we began planning the wedding that I encountered his mother, Victoria Wilson. Our first meeting took place in their Pacific Heights mansion, a monument to old money. Victoria greeted me from atop a marble staircase, her demeanor icy. So, she began surveying me through designer glasses. You work in operations? She practically spat the word. Yes, I said evenly, offering no further explanation. And your parents? They own a grocery store in Chinatown. Small business owners, she murmured, exchanging a look with her husband. Well, everyone has to start somewhere. James squeezed my hand but said nothing, a red flag I chose to ignore. In the weeks leading up to our wedding, Victoria's subtle digs and overt meddling became routine. She dismissed my preferences as charmingly simple and insisted on orchestrating everything. Darling, she'd say, patting my hand as if consoling a child. Leave it to those who understand these things. Even my wedding dress, a modern design with traditional Chinese accents, became a point of contention. But dear at the street Francis, wouldn't you prefer something more appropriate? This is appropriate, I replied firmly. It honors both cultures. She pursed her lips. Well, I suppose it's your decision. Though James's first girlfriend, Caroline, always had such elegant taste. European, you know. James, yet again, said nothing. Despite Victoria's interference, the wedding was beautiful. My parents sat in the front row, tears glistening in their eyes. Meanwhile, Victoria held court, regaling her bridge club with tales of James' accomplished cousins. Of course, not everyone marries up, I overheard her say, her tone dripping with disdain. Post-wedding life didn't ease the tension. Monthly family dinners became tests of patience as Victoria's barbs continued. Emma, dear, could you help the housekeeper clear the table? You must feel more at home in the kitchen. Or, James, Caroline just made partner at her law firm. Isn't it inspiring when people reach their full potential? By Christmas, Victoria announced a grand holiday dinner, emphasizing, everyone who matters will be there. Everyone who matters? I echoed. Yes, well, you understand. Family. James stared into his wine glass, silent as always. What Victoria didn't know was that her Christmas dinner would unravel her assumptions in ways she could never predict. But that's a story for another time. We arrived at the Wilson mansion at exactly 6 o'clock. True to form, Victoria had spared no expense. Thousands of twinkling white lights adorned the 3-story facade, and an enormous wreath with a gold bow graced the front door. Through the frosted windows, I glimpsed a dining room that looked like a luxury magazine spread, complete with towering floral arrangements and gleaming crystal. James, Emma, Victoria greeted us, her smile just as polished and cold as the silverware inside. She wore an elegant designer gown, undoubtedly more expensive than what she imagined I earned in a year. James, darling, everyone's gathered in the living room. Emma, perhaps you could lend a hand in the kitchen with the appetizers. Mom, James began, but I touched his arm lightly. It's fine, I said, my voice calm. Victoria's lips curled in a smug smile. So considerate. That's what we love about her, isn't it, James? Always willing to pitch in. James offered a weak laugh and followed her into the living room, leaving me alone in the hallway. In the kitchen, I found Maria, the Wilsons' housekeeper of 15 years, commanding a small team with the precision of a general. When she spotted me, her warm smile reached her eyes. Mrs. Emma, what are you doing in here? You're a guest. Apparently not, I replied with a wry smile. Still, I rolled up my sleeves and began helping her arrange the smoked salmon canapes. The doorbell chimed again, followed by Victoria's delighted exclamations as more guests arrived. Among the voices, one stood out, Caroline. Of course, James' ex-girlfriend had somehow found her way onto the guest list. When it was time for dinner, Maria and I carried the appetizers into the formal dining room. The sight that greeted me was as grand as I'd imagined. A massive table set for 24, each place adorned with Waterford crystal and antique silver. Name cards, written in Victoria's flowing calligraphy, marked every seat. I walked the perimeter of the table, scanning for my name. It wasn't there. Oh, Emma, Victoria's voice rang out, syrupy with fox concern. We're just a bit tight on space at the main table. I'm sure you understand. Family comes first. Why don't you join Maria in the kitchen? You two seem to get along so well. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to me, some curious, others uncomfortable. Caroline's smirk was barely concealed behind her champagne glass. James's father, Richard, cleared his throat. Perhaps we can fit another chair. Nonsense, Victoria interrupted smoothly. Emma understands. She's used to more casual settings. My cheeks burned, but I forced a neutral expression. Years of handling tough negotiations had taught me the value of composure. Of course, Victoria, whatever makes you comfortable. As I turned to leave, I caught James's gaze. He looked uneasy but said nothing. Something inside me hardened. Back in the kitchen, Maria wrung her hands. Mrs. Emma, this isn't right. Let me speak to Mrs. Wilson. It's fine, I said, pulling out my phone and sending a quick text. I sat at the small kitchen table and opened my laptop. At least let me fix you a plate, Maria insisted. Thank you, Maria, but I have some urgent work to handle. Major supply chain issue. I offered a reassuring smile as I reviewed the data Marcus had sent. The problems in Asia were more severe than I'd hoped, but not insurmountable. From the dining room came the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. Victoria's voice floated above the rest, recounting tales from James's childhood. Caroline chimed in with anecdotes from their high school days. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The doorbell rang again. Maria moved to answer it, but I stopped her. That's for me. I opened the door to find Marcus Sterling, CEO of Genesis Tech, standing in his signature tailored suit, a look of mild concern on his face. Emma, he greeted me warmly. Apologies for intruding on your Christmas dinner, but we need your input on the Asia situation. Of course, I said, gesturing for him to come in. Though technically, I'm not at the dinner table. His brow furrowed. Not at the table? Why not? Why don't we find out together? We walked into the dining room, where the hum of conversation stopped abruptly. 24 heads swiveled toward us, curiosity and confusion etched on their faces. Victoria stood quickly, her expression hard to read. I'm so sorry, sir. The help isn't supposed to let visitors in unannounced. Emma, you should know better. Marcus blinked, then turned to me. Help? I'm confused. Why is my senior vice president of operations eating in the kitchen? The silence was deafening. Victoria's face drained of color. Senior. Vice president? Yes, Marcus said, oblivious to, or perhaps enjoying, the tension. Emma's leadership has been pivotal to Genesis Tech's success. Her supply chain system is groundbreaking. Surely her husband has mentioned her accomplishments. All eyes turned to James, who looked like he might faint. I didn't know, he stammered. You never asked, I said quietly. Caroline's champagne flute slipped from her hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. No one moved to clean it up. But you work in operations, Victoria sputtered. You said. I do, I replied, my tone calm. As the senior vice president, I chose to start at the ground level, just as my parents did in their modest grocery store. Marcus nodded approvingly. Speaking of which, Emma, your mother's dumplings are extraordinary. The board loved them at our last meeting. Victoria collapsed into her chair, her shock plain. Board meetings? Yes. Marcus continued. Emma's one of our youngest board members. Her stock options alone are worth. Marcus, I interjected gently. Perhaps we should handle the Asia situation elsewhere. I wouldn't want to disrupt the family dinner. I turned to Victoria, my gaze steady. Thank you for making my place in this family so abundantly clear. It's helped me make some important decisions. Emma, wait, James said, finally standing. We need to talk about this. We do, I agreed. But not tonight. Tonight, I have a company to run. As I left, I paused. Oh, and Victoria, those dumplings you dismissed last month, they were a hit at our last gala, $200 per plate, quite the success with the governor. Marcus and I walked out into the crisp night air. As we approached his car, he glanced at me. I've been wondering how long you'd let them treat you like that. I smiled faintly. Sometimes it's better to let people show you who they really are. And James? That's a decision for another day. As the car pulled away, my phone buzzed relentlessly with messages. From James, from Richard, even one from Caroline. But the one from Victoria stood out. Emma, dear, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I turned off my phone. Asia needed my attention, and my life needed a fresh perspective. As my mother always said, each day is a new opportunity, and tonight, I'd seized mine. The next morning, I woke up in my private office at Genesis Tech, the resolution to the Asia crisis neatly tucked away in my outbox. A late-night video conference with our Shanghai partners and decisive action had steered the company away from disaster. As sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. Mrs. Chen. Sarah, my assistant, peeked in. Your husband is in the lobby. Again. This is his third attempt since dawn. I sighed and glanced at my phone. 47 missed calls, 93 texts, and an avalanche of emails. Victoria alone had sent 28 increasingly frantic messages. Send him up, Sarah. It's time we talked. When James walked in, he looked nothing like his usual polished self. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, and his tie was nowhere to be seen. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the sleek office, the awards on the walls, and the panoramic view of the bay. Emma, he began, his voice hesitant. This is really your office. For the past 2 years, I replied, motioning for him to sit. Not that you ever asked. He sank into one of the visitor chairs, his gaze dropping. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what, that I'm more than the girl your mother looks down on. That I've built a career while you stood by and said nothing. When exactly was I supposed to do that, James? In between your mother's jabs or your silence? He winced. Mom's difficult. Difficult? I repeated, crossing my arms. She made me eat in the kitchen on Christmas, and you let her. I was going to say something. But you didn't. You never do. My voice was calm but firm. 2 years, James. 2 years of watching you laugh at your mother's jokes about my background. 2 years of staying silent while she paraded Caroline in front of me. 2 years of you being ashamed of me, or at least of what you thought I was. I wasn't ashamed, he protested. Weren't you? Then why didn't you ever ask about my work? Why didn't you visit me here? Why didn't you defend me? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. The board approved your Asia strategy, he said. Stocks up 12% already. Excellent work. Thank you, Marcus. I'll finalize the timeline today. When I hung up, James stared at me, his face pale. You report directly to Marcus Sterling. I have for years, I said, my tone matter of fact. Remember last Christmas when I missed your mother's party because of overtime? I was in Tokyo, finalizing $1 billion deal, but you assumed I was working a shift at a warehouse. Emma, I didn't know, he pleaded. Please, give me another chance. I shook my head. That's the problem, James. Now that you know I'm successful, you want to make things right. What about when you thought I was just a grocery store girl? Didn't I deserve respect then? The silence between us was deafening, and in it, I found my answer. A knock on the door interrupted us. Sarah appeared again, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Wilson is here. She's insistent. I nodded. Sent her in. Victoria swept in, dressed impeccably as always, though her usual composure was absent. Her eyes flitted around the room, widening as they landed on my credentials and accolades. Emma, darling, she began, her voice sticky sweet. We need to clear up this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I arched an eyebrow. You mean where you made me eat in the kitchen, or where you've spent 2 years treating me like I was beneath you? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I didn't know who you were. And that, I said sharply, is the root of the problem. You judge me based on my parents' grocery store. Tell me, Victoria, how much do you think Genesis Tech paid for my supply chain system? She blinked, floundering. I don't. $300 million. Before I even graduated. That modest store taught me everything about respect and hard work. Concepts you still haven't grasped. Emma, James interjected. People can change. Give us a chance to make this right. I opened my laptop, revealing an email from my lawyer. 2 years, James. Have given you plenty of chances. I met his gaze. I'm filing for divorce. Victoria gasped. You can't. Think of James's future. I am, and mine. I stood. The prenup you insisted on. It protects my assets as much as his, and the Pacific Heights mansion. I bought it last year. Check the property records. James sank back, stunned. All this time, while you let your mother belittle me, I was building something real. I pressed a button on my desk. Sarah, please escort Mrs. Wilson out. James, you have until Friday to move your things to your parents' house. Emma, think of what people will say, Victoria exclaimed as security arrived. They'll say what I should have said years ago. Respect isn't earned by a bank account. It's earned by treating people with dignity. I turned to James. Your mother spent 2 years trying to make me feel small. She only succeeded in showing me how small she is. As they left, I stood by the window, watching the fog roll over the bay. A text from my mother appeared on my phone. Mai tan du shaik sin deji hui. Each day is a new opportunity. Smiling, I drafted a press release about Genesis Tech's triumph. The stock would close at a record high that day. But my true success wasn't in the numbers. It was in knowing I'd reclaimed my self-worth. 6 months later, I closed another quarterly report. The divorce was final, the house sold, and Victoria had a new cautionary tale for her bridge club. None of it mattered anymore. Sarah knocked. Mrs. Chen, your parents are here for lunch. I closed my laptop, smiling. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And the best revenge? It's not served cold in a kitchen. It's served in a corner office, surrounded by those who saw your worth all along. Having me as a so-called useless daughter-in-law must be such a disappointment. At least that's how she always made me feel. Her mocking laughter rang through the phone, leaving me stunned. The arrogance in her voice and her blatant disregard for me ignited a surge of anger. She had always treated me like I was nothing, but this time her cruelty went too far. As the rest area faded into the distance, I realized I was completely alone. Moments ago, I had been with my family, but now they had abandoned me. Confusion and fear swept over me, yet her cold, cutting words echoed in my mind. You who just sit around the house don't deserve to stay at a hotel. My chest tightened. Despite all my hard work, she never acknowledged my efforts. I ran an inn with dedication and managed every detail to perfection. Yet she clung to her narrative, intent on destroying my self-worth. On her end of the call, I could hear relatives laughing, their mockery amplifying my isolation. Her influence had turned the entire family against me. Even my husband refused to defend me. Anger and sadness churned inside me. The humiliation, the dismissal of my contributions, and now this outright betrayal. It was too much. Her sneering face and contemptuous eyes filled my mind. Her obsession with pushing me away felt suffocating. Something inside me snapped. A decision crystallized in my mind, no more. I drew a deep breath and held my phone tightly, my fingers trembling, not with fear, but with the raw power of long-suppressed rage. My heart raced, fueled by a newfound determination. "Hello," I said, dialing with shaky fingers. My voice was calm, steady, yet brimming with resolve. "I have a favor to ask." This was the beginning of reclaiming my life. It was also the first step toward an unexpected revenge. My name is Maya Smith, age 40. I'm a manager at a large corporation. I met my husband, Tom, in our late 30s. After dating for 6 months, we decided to marry. In the beginning, he was attentive and kind, but over time, he grew indifferent. Now, our conversations are minimal, and he barely notices my presence. Still, I accepted it, convincing myself this was just the way things were. One evening, as I cleaned up after dinner, Tom spoke to me unexpectedly. "Hey, Maya, I need to talk to you." "Oh, what's up?" I replied, smiling, pleased he was addressing me directly for once. "My family is planning a trip, about 20 relatives. They want me to handle the hotel reservations and organize the itinerary." "Really? That sounds like a big task." "Well, I'm busy with work, and you've got more days off than I do. So you take care of it. Find a cheap place, since I'm paying for everything. If you're coming, pitch in too." I wanted to point out that I worked hard and upheld my responsibilities just as much as he did, even if I had slightly more flexibility. But I bit my tongue. For once, he was asking for my help, and I wanted to oblige. Spending time with his family wasn't exactly enticing, but this was for him. "Okay," I said. "I'll handle everything." "Thanks. Just pick a place that won't embarrass us in front of my family." With that, he lay back on the couch, scrolling through his phone. After finishing the cleanup, I retreated to the bedroom and made a call to a familiar contact. "Hi, it's me. I need a favor," I said, my voice calm yet purposeful. A few days later, Tom's parents arrived at our apartment. When I had shared the travel plans with Tom, he insisted we invite them over to go through the details in person. As they stepped inside, Tom's mother, Elaine, made a beeline for my kitchen cabinets and began rummaging through them without hesitation. "Maya, are you seriously eating gourmet instant curry from a hotel? How indulgent. You should be cooking for Tom instead of living off things like this," she remarked with mock disapproval, pulling out a few packets. Without asking, she casually dropped them into her bag. This was nothing new. Every time Elaine visited, she treated my kitchen like her personal shopping aisle, helping herself to groceries, canned goods, and even decorative items. Once she took a set of dishes without a word. Her justification was always the same. "Anything in my son's house is fair game. What's wrong with me taking it?" After that, I started hiding my favorite items before their visits. Tom's father, Rick, stood idly by, laughing as Elaine continued her spree. Once she was done shopping, she finally sat down. Timing it perfectly, I presented the hotel details. "Here's where we'll be staying," I said, pulling up the website for the luxury hotel I had booked. I handed them my phone to show off the sleek images of the newly opened property. Elaine glanced at it, her lips curling into a dismissive scoff. "Well, aren't you getting above your station? How are you affording this?" Fortunately, I managed to negotiate a group discount under Tom's name. I replied evenly. "I thought you were useless, but I guess you can handle something like this," she said, her tone high. Her words stung, but I didn't let it show. What Elaine didn't know, and what I hadn't shared, was the truth about the hotel. It was part of my own business. My family had operated a modest inn for years, but after it gained media attention, bookings skyrocketed. With the surge in demand, especially from international tourists, we expanded into high-end hospitality. I had been managing the new luxury property ever since. Tom knew my family owned a business, but he had no idea I was running such a prestigious hotel. I had kept it a secret, fearing it would create tension. Tom had once complained about my income surpassing his, so I downplayed my career whenever it came up. Over time, I resolved not to share the full extent of my success with him or his parents. "I'm sure you'll love it," I said with a polite smile. "The place is beautiful and the hospitality is exceptional." Elaine gave me a skeptical look. "We'll see. I'll keep my expectations low." Then, without missing a beat, she added, "Since we're here, let's do some shopping. And we should grab dinner at a nice restaurant too." She completely ignored my offer to cook a meal and left shortly after. The day of the trip finally arrived. Tom, his parents, and I set off in his car, planning to meet the rest of the family at the hotel. Elaine, seated in the back, couldn't resist her usual jabs. "Tom, isn't it time you replaced this old car? You shouldn't be driving around in something so shabby." Tom sighed, keeping his eyes on the road. "I'd love to, but it's not in the budget." I glanced at him, feeling a pang of sympathy. This trip was already expensive, and I knew how much pressure he was under to impress his family. "Oh, I'll pay for it. I can't stand the idea of my son driving around in such a junker," Elaine said with a dramatic sigh from the backseat. "Really? Thanks, Mom," Tom replied, brightening immediately. "Of course. We'll go to the dealership together next week and pick out something more impressive." They continued chatting as if I weren't sitting right there beside Tom in the front seat. Moments like this had become the norm with his family. But that didn't make it hurt any less. "You know," Elaine mused, her tone turning sharp, "if only there were grandkids along for this trip. But I guess at this point, it's too late to hope for that." "Well, that's what happens when you marry a woman who's already past her prime." "Mom, Dad, can you not?" Tom muttered, but he didn't press further, letting their cruel comments hang in the air. I kept quiet, staring out the window, regretting ever agreeing to come along. After a long silence, I finally spoke up softly. "Tom, I need to use the restroom. Can we stop at the next service area?" Elaine immediately rolled her eyes. "Couldn't you have gone before we left? This is why we're always late." "I'm sorry. I'll be quick," I assured her. Tom pulled into the next service area, and I hurried inside. The line for the women's restroom was long, and I nervously glanced at my watch, worried about holding everyone up. After 10 minutes, I finally emerged, only to find the parking space where Tom's car had been now empty. Confused, I looked around, wondering if I had somehow missed them. I called Tom, but he didn't answer. Slowly, the realization sank in. After a few more failed attempts to reach him, I tried Elaine instead. She answered immediately. "Oh, hello, Maya. Something wrong?" "I'm still at the service area," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did something happen?" "Oh, we're already at the hotel," she replied, her tone dripping with disdain. "Trips like these are for family, you know. You're just an outsider tagging along." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. "Elaine, you're already spoiled with what my son provides without working or contributing. You can sit this one out," she cut me off, her mocking laughter ringing through the line. In the background, I could hear other family members laughing too. Then, without waiting for a response, she hung up. I stood there stunned. The weight of her words settled over me as I fought against the despair creeping in. I had worked tirelessly to organize this trip, putting my own responsibilities on hold, only to be abandoned like this. But feeling sorry for myself wouldn't solve anything. I faced worse as a hotel manager, handling crises with composure. Drawing on that strength, I took a deep breath and called the hotel. "Hello, this is Maya. I have a reservation under Smith. Could you confirm it, please?" After ensuring everything was in order, I made another call. "Hi, it's Maya," I said to my assistant at the main office. "I'm stranded at a service area and need a ride to the hotel." "Of course, Ms. Smith. I'll send a car right away," she replied. Relieved, I hung up. Soon, I'd be back on track. Meanwhile, in the car, Elaine gloated to Tom. "That woman's never been a good fit for you. She's too old for kids and not exactly a catch." "Mom, enough," Tom said, though his voice lacked conviction. "I'm just saying, you deserve someone who's actually a family person," she continued. Tom sat in silence, torn but unable to find the courage to defend me. Later, at the hotel, Tom and his family settled into their luxurious rooms, enjoying the evening as if nothing had happened. They gathered in the dining area for an elaborate meal. Tom really went all out with this place, Rick said, looking around in approval. This hotel is famous nationwide. I hope it didn't cost too much. Well, Maya handled the arrangements, Tom admitted, trying to sound casual. I'm covering it, of course. That's what a good husband does. Tom's unease was evident, but he tried to push it aside and enjoy the moment. The next morning, as the family prepared to check out, they assumed all charges were already covered. But as they gathered in the lobby, the hotel manager approached them. Excuse me, here's your final bill, he said, handing Tom a detailed statement. Tom frowned as he glanced at the total. His eyes widened. The charges included a suite upgrade, additional services, and the group's special rate. Wait, Tom stammered. Why is this so much more than expected? I thought everything was handled with a discount. I apologize, sir, the manager said with polite firmness, but the discounted rate was only available if the owner was present. Tom frowned, his confusion evident. The owner? Who's that supposed to be? That would be Maya Smith, your wife. The room fell silent. Tom's face paled and a hush settled over the family. Elaine clutched her purse tightly, as though holding onto it could somehow make the charges vanish. You mean she, Maya, owns this hotel? Tom stammered, his voice shaky. The manager gave a calm nod. Yes, she's the owner. Since she wasn't present, the discounted rate is void. The total amount due now is $20,000. Elaine gasped, her grip on her purse tightening further. Tom, do something. This must be some kind of mistake. I didn't know, Tom stuttered, looking increasingly flustered. I didn't realize Maya was the owner. The manager extended the bill with a steady hand. How would you like to settle this? The other relatives began murmuring among themselves, shifting uncomfortably. You didn't know she owned this place, and she paid for everything. Someone whispered. Tom's gaze fell to the floor, unable to meet their eyes. Meanwhile, I arrived at the hotel, determined to face Tom and his family. The staff greeted me warmly. Welcome back, Miss Smith, the manager said with a respectful smile. Everything has been handled as you requested. I thanked him and headed to the lobby. As I entered, I spotted Tom and his family at the counter, their expressions a mix of embarrassment and unease. Squaring my shoulders, I approached them, my head held high. Good morning, everyone, I said, my voice calm but firm. I see you're having a lovely time. The shock on their faces was almost comical. Elaine was the first to recover, her tone thick with false sweetness. Maya, dear, we were just surprised. We didn't realize you were the owner here. I'm sure you didn't, I replied evenly, but I hope my outsider status no longer concerns you. Maya, listen, Tom began, but I held up a hand to stop him. No, you listen. You left me behind because I wasn't family enough. But I'm the reason you're even here, and I pay for everything. A heavy silence followed. No one dared to look at me, their eyes cast downward. Now about that bill, I added, my tone resolute. No more discounts. Consider it payment for the years of disrespect. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away, a sense of closure settling over me. I left them to figure out how to handle the cost on their own. Later that day, I decided to check out of my hotel suite and head home. The decision felt symbolic, leaving behind not just the trip, but Tom and his family, once and for all. Back in my suite, I packed my bags, reflecting on everything I had endured. This trip had been a turning point, a realization that I deserved respect and appreciation, things I'd never received from Tom or his family. As I was finishing up, the manager knocked on the door and entered carrying a parting gift. Miss Smith, thank you for your continued partnership and for trusting us. We hope this is just the beginning of many more successful ventures. Thank you, I replied, smiling. This hotel feels like a second home to me, and you've helped make it truly special. Checking out of the hotel felt like stepping into a new chapter. A powerful sense of freedom washed over me, freedom from the past, from constant judgment, and from the weight of others' expectations. In the days that followed, I filed for divorce, finally choosing myself over a loveless marriage. I poured my energy into expanding the family business, opening more luxury inns, and pursuing dreams I'd shelved for far too long. Surprisingly, news of my divorce and Tom's mounting financial troubles soon spread. But I didn't dwell on it. My new life was brimming with purpose, community, and growth, surrounded by people who respected me and believed in my vision. On quiet evenings, I'd raise a glass to myself, grateful for the strength to walk away and build a life on my own terms. Happiness, I realized, was something I could claim for myself, and I wasn't looking back.
My name is Layla, a 28-year-old housewife. My husband, Tom, works for a company, and we recently welcomed our long-awaited child, a beautiful baby girl named Elena. Our little family of 3 feels complete. Elena is so adorable that I could spend hours just staring at her. She looks just like you did when you were little, Layla, my mom often says. Seeing Elena brings back so many memories for her. Today, I invited my parents over to meet Elena for the first time. Tom, have your parents met her yet? I asked during breakfast. Tom hesitated before replying, no, they haven't. My parents aren't fond of children. They only had me because of societal expectations, and they made it clear they didn't want more kids. They're not interested in meeting Elena either. When I told them about her, they said not to bring her until she's an adult. Can you believe that? I was stunned. That's hard to imagine. I've met your parents a few times, and they didn't seem like the type. Is it really possible to dislike children so much that they wouldn't want to see their own grandchild? I'll send them a picture, Tom said, sighing. Maybe it'll change their minds. I'll keep trying to convince them to meet her. True to his word, Tom sent his parents a photo of Elena, but their response was lukewarm at best. As the months passed, Tom's efforts to persuade them continued, with little success. It's been almost 10 months since Elena was born, I said one evening. Have your parents changed their minds? Tom shook his head sadly. No, they're still against meeting her. I've tried everything, but they won't reconsider. I feel like a terrible dad for not being able to bring my parents around. I took his hand in mine. Tom, you're not a bad dad. Elena and I see how hard you're trying, and we love you for it, right, Elena? I smiled at our baby, who was peacefully napping in her crib. Thanks, Layla, he said, his voice soft. I'll keep trying. While I admired Tom's persistence, I was growing tired of trying to cheer him up. If his parents didn't want to meet Elena, I was ready to accept it and move on, but I didn't have the heart to say that out loud, knowing how much it mattered to him. And what if Elena asked one day why she never met her grandparents? How could I explain their indifference to her? As Elena's first birthday approached, something unexpected happened, a phone call from my in-laws. Layla, it's been a while, Tom's mother began. Yes, it has. How are you? I replied cautiously. We're well. How is the baby? She asked. Her sudden interest in Elena caught me off guard. She's doing great, I said. Layla, did we do something to upset you? She asked hesitantly. No, not at all, I replied, confused. Other than not wanting to meet your granddaughter, everything has been fine. Then why haven't you let us meet her? She asked, her voice breaking. If it's hard for you to come here, we can come to you, or we can meet somewhere neutral, like a restaurant. Please, just let us see her, even if it's only once. I was shocked. You're saying, you want to meet her? Of course we do, she said, her voice trembling. Your father and I have been waiting to meet our first grandchild. We'll do whatever it takes to make it happen. Please, Layla. Her words left me speechless. Hadn't Tom told me they didn't want to meet Elena? I explained what Tom had said to me, and my mother-in-law sounded equally surprised. Just then, my mom, who was helping with Elena, overheard the conversation and suggested I hand her the phone. Hello, this is Layla's mom. It's been a while, she said warmly. As the two mothers began talking, Elena started crying. I held her close, my mind spinning with questions. Why had Tom told me they didn't want to meet Elena? And how would this revelation change things for our family? As Elena began to cry, I stepped away to comfort her. When I returned, it seemed like the moms, my mother and mother-in-law, had reached some sort of agreement. They told me they had come up with a plan but insisted I keep it a secret from Tom until everything was carried out. A few days later, on Tom's day off, my parents came over for a small family get-together. Elena just keeps getting cuter, doesn't she? My mom said, smiling as Elena babbled away. She's getting so good at talking too, my dad added. She's so smart, I agreed, holding Elena on my lap. It's hard to believe Tom's parents don't want to meet such an adorable granddaughter. They never liked kids to begin with, my mom replied, but Tom has been working really hard to change their minds. Good for him. Ever since I discovered that Tom had been lying to both me and my parents, I'd started doubting everything he said. It was frustrating, to say the least, but today, it was all going to come to light. the atmosphere seemed cheerful, but I could feel the tension bubbling under the surface. Everyone was nervous, waiting for the big moment. "What are we waiting for?" Tom asked, oblivious to what was about to happen. Just then, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to see Tom's parents standing there. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing here?" Tom stammered, his face turning pale. "We're here to meet our granddaughter." "Of course," his mother said firmly. "Hurry and bring her out. But first, we need to wash our hands. Where's the bathroom?" Tom looked flustered, clearly caught off guard. For almost a year, he had been lying to everyone, and now his deceit was about to unravel. I decided to play along. "When did they change their minds?" I asked innocently. "They seem really eager to meet her now." Well, yeah," Tom muttered, avoiding eye contact. "I've been talking to them, and I finally convinced them to meet her." "Nice try, Tom," his mother said sharply, "but we know the truth. No matter what excuses you come up with, we're meeting our granddaughter today." After washing their hands, Tom's parents approached me with warm smiles. They were playing their part perfectly, pretending they didn't know the full extent of Tom's deception. "I never said you couldn't meet her," I said, feigning confusion. "What's going on? Why the sudden visit?" "What are you talking about?" his father interjected. "We've been wanting to meet her for so long, isn't that right?" At that moment, my parents walked in with Elena, who had been in the other room. "There she is," my mother-in-law exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. "Oh my goodness, what an adorable angel. Is this really our granddaughter?" Elena smiled, giggling as she reached for her grandparents. "She's such a sweetheart," I said, handing her to them. "I'm glad you finally got to meet her. Now we can all talk." Tom looked cornered. "What's going on here?" I asked, turning to him. "Why did you lie to both sides to keep them from meeting Elena? You owe us all an explanation." It was then that Tom's true motives came to light. He had been worried about the inheritance. As an only child, he had assumed everything would go to him. But after Elena was born, he realized she would have rights to a share. In his desperation to secure it all for himself, he had concocted a plan to prevent his parents from forming a bond with Elena. "You've been thinking about inheritance when your parents are still alive?" I said, appalled. "You kept them from their granddaughter for a year, because of money?" "That's beyond selfish," Tom stammered. "No, it's not like that. I was just following advice from my boss." "Enough," his mother interrupted. "Thanks to your efforts, we're going straight to a lawyer to make sure everything goes to Elena. While you're at it," I added, "don't forget another document you'll need to sign, the divorce papers." Tom froze. "Layla, no. Please don't do this. I can't stay married to someone who lies to everyone around him. It's only a matter of time before you try to manipulate Elena too." "I'm done. Mom, Dad," Tom pleaded, "will you still see Elena if Layla divorces me?" "Of course," his mother said coldly. "We're cutting ties with you, not our granddaughter." "You've made your bed, Tom." As I gathered Elena and prepared to leave, Tom's parents reiterated their plans. "We'll make sure our estate is handled properly," his father said. "And don't worry, Layla. Elena will always have us in her corner." With that, I walked out, leaving behind the home I had shared with Tom. It was no longer a place of trust or love, just a reminder of the lies that had nearly torn our family apart. After deciding to leave Tom behind, I packed up my things and returned to my parents' house. "You're welcome to come too, Mom and Dad," I told them. "We're getting everything ready to celebrate Elena's birthday there." Tom, left alone, pleaded desperately, "Wait. Don't leave me here by myself." But his cries fell on deaf ears as we headed to my parents' place. Shortly after, I finalized the divorce and secured full custody of Elena, along with child support. Tom didn't take it well. Angry at his boss for planting selfish ideas in his head, he caused trouble at work, which eventually led to him losing his job. He struggled to manage housework and daily life, often turning to his parents for help. However, they completely ignored his pleas, fed up with his behavior. I've heard they're even planning to sell their home and move far away, ensuring Tom won't find them. Back at my parents' house, I've been raising Elena with their unwavering support. I managed to land a full-time job, and life has been looking up. Today is Elena's second birthday, and we're throwing a party to celebrate this precious milestone. As friends and family gathered, I stood up to make a toast. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us today. If I may, I'd like to propose a toast. Everyone raised their glasses. Cheers, Elena beamed and, in her tiny voice, joined in. Cheers, wait, one of my relatives said with a laugh. She's only 2, right? I've never seen a 2-year-old say something like that so confidently. Neither have I, added another. Elena loves saying cheers, my mom chimed in. She practiced with Layla yesterday and did great. Surrounded by love, Elena is growing into a bright, happy little girl, a true treasure to everyone around her. As I reflect on how far we've come, I feel nothing but gratitude for the love and support that surrounds us. The future feels full of possibilities, and I'm excited to see what's next in our journey. I arrived home, greeted by warmth and celebration. Welcome back. Jel will be bringing her fiancé soon, my mom said. Jel is getting married? I said, still processing the news. It doesn't feel real. That day, my sister Jel came home to announce her engagement. I also decided to visit my parents, eager to share my own exciting news. Jel's getting married, and now I'm going to be a mom too. So many happy events. I exclaimed. It's been such a whirlwind, Jel said. By the way, I heard you left your new job. Was something wrong? It's a long story, I admitted. I didn't want to worry you, and I thought everything was resolved once I married Peter. Jel's fiancé, Josh, entered the room. Hi, I'm Josh, Jel's fiancé, he introduced himself. Nice to meet you, I said, smiling. Oh, you're Josh? You're younger than I expected. Don't be so nervous, everything's going to be fine. Despite my reassurances, Josh seemed uneasy. When's the wedding? I asked. Well, we haven't set a date yet, Jel replied. We need to coordinate it with your due date, now that we know you're pregnant. Josh's face turned even paler. Oh, I didn't realize, he stammered. Congratulations. Something about Josh's nervous demeanor unsettled me. He reminded me of someone from my past, though I couldn't place it immediately. The wedding day. The day of Jel's wedding arrived, filled with joy for some and anxiety for me. As I got up to use the restroom, supporting my heavy belly, my phone rang. Hello? I answered. The voice on the other end sent chills down my spine. Have you forgotten the name of the man you betrayed? John hissed. You and your unborn child should just disappear, you con artist. Before I could respond, I felt a violent shove from behind. I barely managed to grab the handrail, avoiding a fall down the stairs. I spun around to see Jel's future mother-in-law glaring at me. You've trampled on Josh's feelings, and you won't get away with it, she shouted, lunging at me again. Stop. Peter, my husband, appeared and restrained her. As chaos erupted, John emerged from the shadows. So, you're still alive, he sneered. You think you can cover your tracks by marrying that thug and having his kid? I'll make sure neither of you survives. John picked up an ashtray and aimed it at me, but Peter swiftly disarmed him, pinning him to the ground. The wedding descended into turmoil. An emergency meeting was called, where John, his mother, Josh, and our families gathered in a tense room. I'm so sorry, Josh began, his voice trembling. But John slammed his fist on the table. Why are you apologizing? The one at fault here is her. He pointed at me, spouting delusional accusations. You promised to marry me, John ranted, but instead, you betrayed me and got pregnant by that thug. Peter calmly replied, enough. Your lies won't hold up. We have proof of your attempted murder. What proof? John scoffed. Jel stepped forward, holding a camera. Actually, we recorded everything. This footage shows your mother pushing Emma down the stairs. John and his mother went pale. We've already called the police, Peter added. Aftermath. John and his mother were arrested and later faced charges for attempted murder. Josh, who had been manipulated by his family for years, cut ties with them. He later visited us, tearfully apologizing for their actions. Meanwhile, Jel and I moved forward with our lives. I gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and Jel remained optimistic about her future. Though the ordeal left scars, our family grew stronger, united by love and resilience.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Chen. Growing up, my parents instilled in me the belief that true wealth comes from humility and smart work. While other kids dreamed of being doctors or lawyers, I was captivated by the stock market. By 12, I was devouring investment books and obsessively tracking market trends, much to my parents' bewilderment. "Sweetie, maybe you should spend more time with your friends," my mom would suggest, eyeing me over stacks of financial reports. "This is fun for me, Mom," I'd reply without looking up. "Did you know Warren Buffett bought his first stock at 11? She'd chuckle, shaking her head. "Just promise me you won't forget to live while you're planning your empire." That promise grew harder to keep as my hobby turned into a passion and eventually expertise. By 16, I was managing a modest portfolio with my savings and allowance. Winning a full scholarship to study finance at Harvard felt like destiny. At Harvard, I met Michael. He was studying business administration, charming, ambitious, and aiming to climb the corporate ladder. We met during finals week, both reaching for the same economics textbook. "Ladies first," he said with a warm smile. I laughed. "Thanks, I'm Jennifer." "Michael, maybe we could study together." What began as a shared study session blossomed into daily coffee dates, then a relationship. Unlike others I'd met, Michael admired my ambition. "You're going to dominate the business world," he'd say, watching me dissect market trends. "Any company would be lucky to have you." What he didn't know was that I wasn't planning to work for anyone else. My scholarship covered everything, so I funneled my earnings into investments. By graduation, my portfolio had grown exponentially. But I kept it quiet. I wanted success on my terms, not as the girl with the trust fund. Michael landed a prestigious job at Sterling Industries, a major tech firm in Boston, while I chose to work independently. When I declined several high-profile offers, Michael was skeptical. "Are you sure?" he asked. "These are dream opportunities." "I have my own plans," I replied with a smile. "Trust me." A year later, we got married in a modest ceremony. Michael's mother, Patricia, was less than thrilled with my career choice. "Investment consulting," she'd sneer. "Is that even a real job?" I smiled, recalling my parents' advice about staying humble. By then, my portfolio was worth over $50 million, strategically diversified and quietly making me one of Sterling's largest individual shareholders. Though no one, not even Michael, knew. Michael thrived at Sterling, rising through the ranks to work under James Wilson, the arrogant VP of operations. Wilson was infamous for his outdated views, especially about women. "The problem with modern marriages," he'd say at company events, "is women forgetting their place." Michael would laugh awkwardly, avoiding confrontation. It irritated me, but I let it slide until the annual executive party. Sterling was unveiling restructuring plans, and as a key shareholder, I had a vested interest in attending. "Are you sure you want to come?" Michael asked. "These events can be dull for non-employees." "I think it's time I took a closer look at your work," I replied, carefully applying my makeup. I chose a classic black dress, pearl earrings, and my grandmother's vintage watch, a talisman in every major decision I'd made. The hotel ballroom buzzed with chatter as we arrived. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, and the scent of champagne lingered in the air. Michael led me to James Wilson, who was holding court near the bar. "Jennifer." "Michael," James called, raising his glass. We were just discussing Sterling's exciting new direction. "Cutting R&D for short-term profits?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Doesn't innovation drive sustainable growth?" James's smile faltered. "Ah, the little wife has opinions on business, does she?" Laughter rippled through the group. Michael shifted uncomfortably. "She likes to read the financial news," he said quickly. "Honey, maybe we should grab some drinks." But James wasn't done. "Sterling's biggest problem," he announced loudly, "is too many voices from people who don't understand real business, like housewives who think reading the Wall Street Journal makes them experts." The crowd chuckled, but I noticed the CEO, Thomas Richards, watching with interest. My husband, once so proud of my intelligence, stared at his shoes. Before I could speak, a familiar voice interrupted. "Actually, James, you might want to rethink that." Sarah Martinez, my private banker and confidant, stepped forward, her smile sharp. "Should I explain, Jennifer, or would you like to?" James's smug expression faltered. "What's going on here?" I straightened, feeling my grandmother's watch against my wrist. The time had come. "Since you're so concerned about shareholder value, James," I said, my voice calm, "perhaps we should discuss the report I'm presenting at Monday's board meeting." The one outlining why your restructuring plan will fail. James turned crimson. Board meeting. What are you talking about? CEO Richards stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. Jennifer Chen, JC Holdings. I knew the name sounded familiar. I smiled. Surprise. Strategic anonymity can be a powerful tool. What's going on? Michael whispered, his face pale and voice trembling. Sarah stepped forward, her tone cutting through the silence. Your wife, she announced to the room, owns 51% of Sterling Industries shares. And no, she doesn't spend her days shopping. The silence hung for a moment before chaos erupted. James Wilson's face turned a vivid red, cycling through shades I didn't know were possible. Michael looked as though he might faint. This is absurd, James sputtered. There must be some mistake. Sarah, ever composed, tapped on her tablet. I can show you the documentation if you'd like. I have all the records right here. CEO Richards stepped forward, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. That won't be necessary, Sarah. I've suspected as much for some time. The board has been impressed with Mrs. Chen's insights and recommendations for years. James turned to him, stunned. You knew. Of course, Richards replied smoothly. Why do you think your restructuring plan hasn't been approved? Mrs. Chen raised significant objections. Michael finally found his voice, though it wavered. Jennifer. How? When? I met his wide-eyed gaze. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, I suggested, glancing at the growing crowd of onlookers. My office is just upstairs, Richards offered. Shall we? The elevator ride was oppressively silent. Michael alternated between glancing at me and staring at the floor, while James seethed. Sarah, steady as ever, stood by my side, a quiet but unwavering presence. Richard's office was expansive, with panoramic views of the Boston skyline. As we took our seats, James immediately claimed the chair nearest Richard's desk, as if proximity could restore his authority. Well, Richards began, leaning back in his chair, this has been an eventful evening. Eventful? James exploded. This is outrageous. She can't possibly. She can and does. Sarah interrupted, laying documents on the desk. Jennifer Chen, through carefully managed investment vehicles, controls 51% of Sterling Industries. She's been building her position over the past 5 years. Michael's expression morphed from confusion to hurt. 5 years? But we've been married for 3. I started investing in Sterling before we met. I explained evenly. The company had potential but needed modernization. I saw an opportunity. Modernization? James sneered. Yes, James, I replied calmly. Modernization. Like fostering innovation instead of getting R&D. Like respecting your employees instead of perpetuating a toxic workplace. Richards leaned forward. Mrs. Chen's recommendations have been instrumental in shaping our strategy. Her analysis has consistently outperformed expectations. Michael's voice was barely audible. Why didn't you tell me? I held his gaze. Would it have made a difference? Would you have defended me against James's comments if you'd known I was Sterling's majority shareholder? He flinched, the answer clear without being spoken. This is preposterous, James barked, rising from his chair. I've dedicated 15 years to Sterling. You can't just turn it into a toxic environment where innovation and talent are stifled. I interrupted. James, your restructuring plan would destroy this company. The board won't be supporting it, Richards cut in. In fact, we need to discuss your future with Sterling. My future? James looked stricken. Yes, I said, standing to meet his glare. Your leadership is outdated, your strategies are short-sighted, and your conduct unacceptable. Sterling deserves better. You can't fire me, James shouted. You're just a majority shareholder, Sarah interjected coolly. And yes, she can. Michael remained frozen, his expression unreadable. You told me you were consulting, he murmured. You said it was small scale. I never lied, I said softly. I just didn't tell you everything. Would you have respected my decisions if I had? James erupted again, pointing at Michael. She's tearing us apart. Women like her. That's enough, Richard snapped, his tone sharp. James, you'll receive the details of your separation package tomorrow. Please leave. James stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Sarah excused herself, leaving me alone with Michael and Richards. Mrs. Chen, Richards began, will you be taking a more active role in the company? Yes, I replied firmly, starting with a comprehensive review of our culture and leadership. Michael finally spoke, his voice cracking. And what about us? I turned to him, my voice steady. That depends. Are you ready to see me as an equal, or am I still just the little wife you asked to stay quiet at company events? I need time, he stammered, standing abruptly. This is all too much. He left, and I watched his retreating figure. Richards cleared his throat. Family and business rarely mix well. True, I said, exhaling deeply, but principles shouldn't be compromised. The days that followed were a whirlwind. James's firing made headlines, Sterling Industries, a shakeup at the top. The stock price dipped briefly before recovering as my vision for the company became public. Michael stayed with his parents, processing everything. His mother left a string of hostile voicemails, which I deleted without hesitation. My focus remained on transforming Sterling, revitalizing R&D, implementing work-life balance policies, and fostering innovation. A week later, Michael returned. He looked worn, his usual polish replaced by exhaustion. Can we talk? He asked hesitantly. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat, then immediately stood again, pacing nervously. I've been thinking about everything, he began. About us, about work. And? I prompted. I was wrong, he admitted, his voice low. I let James and others disrespect you. I should have stood up for you. I was so focused on my career that I forgot what really matters. I watched him for a moment before replying. Change doesn't come through words, Michael. It comes through actions. Are you ready to show me that you see me as your equal? He nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. Yes, I am. I waited silently, giving him space to continue. But you weren't completely honest either, Michael added after a moment. You kept such a huge part of your life hidden from me. How are we supposed to have a real marriage with secrets like that? You're right, I admitted, keeping my voice calm. I should have trusted you with the truth. But Michael, ask yourself, why didn't I feel I could? He sank into the chair, his hands running through his hair. Because I showed you I couldn't be trusted. Every time I laughed at James's jokes, every time I told you to stay quiet. I proved I cared more about office politics than supporting my wife. The next few weeks tested everything, my marriage, my resolve, and my ability to steer Sterling Industries through massive change. James Wilson hadn't gone quietly. He hired a lawyer and threatened to sue for wrongful termination, and his allies within the company whispered behind my back. She's tearing down our traditions, they muttered in the break room. This is what happens when you let emotions run a business, others sneered. But facts don't lie. Within a month, employee satisfaction soared by 40%, and R&D, finally free from James's stifling grip, filed 12 patent applications. The stock price climbed steadily, proving that my changes were more than just radical. They were necessary. At home, Michael hovered in a strange limbo, sleeping in the guest room and walking on eggshells around me. His mother, Patricia, however, had no such hesitation. She stormed into our house one afternoon, her designer heels clicking like gunfire. We need to talk, she announced, barely pausing before stepping into the living room. By all means, I said dryly, closing the door behind her. This power trip of yours has gone far enough, she declared, folding her arms. You've made your point. Now step back and let the men handle business. I raised an eyebrow. The men? You've humiliated Michael enough already, she snapped. His colleagues don't know how to treat him anymore. Do you have any idea what this is doing to his career? Humiliating? I repeated. Like being laughed at during business functions? Like being dismissed as just a housewife? That's different. She waved a manicured hand dismissively. That's just how business works. Men need to. Need to what, Patricia? Undermine women to prop up their egos. Pretend competence doesn't exist if it comes from the wrong gender. You tricked him, she burst out. My son married you thinking you were a normal wife, and no. Now what? Michael's voice cut through the tension, startling us both. Michael. Patricia turned to him, her expression softening with relief. Thank goodness you're here. We need to talk sense into her before she destroys everything. But Michael wasn't looking at her. His eyes were locked on me, filled with something I hadn't seen in weeks, understanding. Mom, he said evenly, you need to leave. What? But? Now, he said firmly. After she left, silence settled between us. Michael sank onto the couch, exhaustion etched into his face. I heard everything, he said quietly, and I finally realized I've been just like her, treating you like you needed to be managed, not supported. And I'm sorry. I sat down beside him, keeping a cautious distance. I didn't want to outshine you, Michael. I just wanted your respect as your wife, as a partner, as a person. You have it, he said softly. I know I don't deserve your trust right now, but I want to earn it. Not because of your money or your power, but because I love you. And I want to be the partner you deserve. My phone buzzed, breaking the moment. It was Sarah. Jennifer, she said when I answered, James has withdrawn his lawsuit. Word about Sterling's latest quarterly projections has spread, and they're impressive. Send me the details, I said with a smile. And Sarah, thank you for everything. When I hung up, Michael asked, good news. James is backing down. I confirmed. It seems success really is the best revenge. Michael nodded thoughtfully. What happens now? With Sterling and with us. Sterling will keep evolving, I replied. We're rolling out a new parental leave policy and launching a mentorship program for women in tech next month. And us? He asked, his voice hesitant. I took a deep breath. That depends. Are you ready for a marriage of equals? Really ready? I'd like to try, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. Starting with moving out of the guest room, if you're okay with that. It's killing my back. I laughed, surprising myself. We'll need couples counseling, and you'll have to stand up to your mother. Done, he said, grinning. Though maybe we should have dinner with her next week. I'd love to see her face when you explain your women's leadership initiative. For the first time in weeks, I felt real hope for our future.
I never asked to be born, but my parents, Wayne and Abigail Billy, made it painfully clear from the start that I wasn't planned. I'm Madison, the second child they didn't want. My older sister, Amber, was the golden child, the one they dreamed of. Growing up in the Billy house was like living in two separate worlds. Amber's world was full of love, attention, and celebration. Mine, a cold, shadowy place filled with indifference and barely concealed resentment. I still remember my 8th birthday as if it happened yesterday. I woke up hopeful, daring to believe this year might be different. Maybe this time they'd remember, maybe they'd care. But when I came downstairs, my parents were seated at the kitchen table, engrossed in a conversation about Amber's upcoming dance recital. Morning, I said, trying to keep the hope from my voice. Mom looked up briefly, her expression blank. Oh, Madison, your cereal's in the cupboard. That was it. No happy birthday, no hug, nothing. Later that evening, at dinner, Dad finally remembered. Oh, right. Happy birthday, kid, he muttered, not even bothering to look up from his plate. Mom blinked in surprise. Is that today? I thought it was next week. That night, I lay in bed clutching the only birthday card I received, a small note from Grandma Francesca. Her words were like a lifeline. My dearest Madison, happy birthday, sweetheart. You bring so much joy to my life. Never forget how special and loved you are. Love always, Grandma. I read the card over and over, desperately trying to believe her words. But how could I feel special when my own parents barely acknowledged my existence? School wasn't much better. Parent-teacher conferences were an endless cycle of disappointment. Other kids' parents showed up, proud and supportive. Mine always had an excuse. Sorry, Madison, Mom would say, her voice devoid of remorse. Amber has a dance competition that day. You understand, right? I'd nod, pretending it didn't hurt, but it always did. The worst moments came late at night when they thought I couldn't hear. Their voices would drift up the stairs, sharp and cruel. I just don't get it, Dad said one evening. Amber's so bright and talented. Why can't Madison be more like her? Mom sighed heavily. I know, it's like she doesn't even try. Remember how Amber was reading at 4? Madison could barely tie her shoes at that age. Their words carved deep scars into me, each one a reminder that I'd never be good enough. I became quiet and withdrawn, retreating into myself because, really, what was the point of trying? The only person who truly saw me was Grandma Francesca. Every visit to her cozy little house felt like stepping into a different world, a world where I was loved and heard, a world where I could just be. When I was 13, I hit my breaking point. Home had become unbearable, and I knew I couldn't stay. One day, tears streaming down my face, I went to Grandma. Grandma, I whispered, my voice trembling, can I live with you? Her answer was immediate, her embrace warm and unwavering. Oh, sweetheart, she said, pulling me close, you'll always have a home with me, and one day, everything I have will be yours. I melted into her arms, feeling safe for the first time in years. I didn't care about inheriting anything, I just wanted to feel loved. When my parents found out, their reactions were predictably indifferent. That tiny house? Dad scoffed. She works at a library for peanuts. What could she possibly offer you? Mom just shrugged, relief evident in her voice. Well, if that's what you want, it'll make things easier for us. Their apathy stung, but it also reassured me that I was making the right choice. They didn't value Grandma's love, but I did. Living with Grandma wasn't easy, money was tight, and we often struggled to make ends meet, but none of that mattered. For the first time, I felt cherished. Grandma attended every school event, always sitting in the front row, cheering me on. My drawings covered her fridge, and she'd proudly tell everyone about her brilliant granddaughter. Under her care, I began to thrive. The shy, quiet girl I had been slowly disappeared. I made friends, joined clubs, and my grades improved. Love and support had transformed me. Everything seemed to be falling into place, until one crisp autumn afternoon when Grandma came home looking unusually emotional. Her smile was there, but her eyes brimmed with tears. Madison, sweetheart, she said, her voice trembling, we need to talk. It's about my sister, Marilyn. She passed away. I barely remembered Aunt Marilyn, a wealthy and distant businesswoman. I'm so sorry, Grandma, I said, taking her hand. She squeezed it tightly. There's more, Madison. Marilyn, she left me everything, her entire fortune. We're millionaires now, sweetheart, multimillionaires. The news spread quickly. It didn't take long for my parents to reappear, knocking on our door one evening. When Grandma opened it, there they stood, Wayne and Abigail Billy, their eyes shiny with tears. Francesca, Madison, Mom said, her voice trembling in a way I'd never heard before, we've made a terrible mistake. Dad nodded, looking unusually humble. We've been awful parents, truly awful, but we've realized how wrong we were, and we want to make things right. I stood frozen. The same people who had ignored me for years were now pleading for a second chance. Please, Madison, Mom said, her voice trembling as she reached out to me. Come home. Let us be the family we should have been all along. I turned to Grandma, my heart heavy with uncertainty. She gave me a kind, reassuring smile. It's your decision, sweetheart, she said softly. Whatever you choose, I'll support you. After days of agonizing over it, I decided to give them another chance. With Grandma's blessing, I packed my things and returned to the Billy house. At first, it felt like a dream come true. Mom and Dad were attentive and loving, coming to every school event and cheering me on. They gave me thoughtful gifts, not expensive, but ones that showed they were paying attention to what I liked. We even started having family game nights. I'll never forget the first time Dad ruffled my hair after I won at Monopoly, saying, "That's my girl." The warmth that spread through me was indescribable. The biggest surprise was bedtime. Mom began tucking me in every night, something I'd always dreamed of as a little girl. She'd smooth my hair and kiss my forehead. "Good night, sweetheart," she'd whisper. "We love you so much." Even Amber seemed different. She included me in her plans, introduced me to her friends, and gave me advice about boys and makeup. I wanted so badly to believe it was real, that my family had truly changed and finally saw me for who I was. But a tiny voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts. Why now? Why only after Grandma came into money? I pushed those thoughts aside, determined to enjoy the loving family life I'd always dreamed of. I called Grandma often, excitedly sharing how happy I was. She always sounded glad for me, but there was a hint of caution in her voice. "Just remember, Madison," she'd say gently, "you always have a home with me, no matter what." Life settled into a new routine. Amber, always the golden child, graduated high school with honors and went off to a prestigious college. Grandma moved into a beautiful new house, finally retiring from her job at the library. And me? I was thriving, doing well in school, with close friends, and even dating Caleb, a boy from my chemistry class. One Thursday evening, I had a date with Caleb at the local diner. I spent hours getting ready, changing outfits and redoing my makeup, feeling nervous but excited. But as I sat waiting at the diner, my phone buzzed. "Sorry, Madison, something came up, can't make it tonight." Disappointment sank in, and I left the diner early, heading home. The house was quiet when I arrived, so I used my key to avoid waking anyone. As I walked past Dad's study, I heard voices. I was about to announce my return when Mom's voice stopped me cold. "I don't know how much longer I can keep up this act," she said, her tone sharp with frustration. "I never wanted her in the first place, and pretending to love her is exhausting." I froze, my heart hammering. Pretending to love me? Dad's response turned my stomach. "We just have to be patient. Once Mom passes, all the money will go to Madison. If we play our cards right, we can convince her to share it with us. Just think of the life we could have." Their words shattered me. Every moment of love and acceptance had been a lie, a calculated performance for Grandma's fortune. Tears welled up as the truth sunk in, crushing the fragile hope I'd been clinging to. I took out my phone and hit record, unable to stop myself from capturing their betrayal. When I couldn't bear to listen any longer, I walked back to the front door, took a deep breath, and slammed it loudly. "I'm home," I called out, forcing my voice to sound steady. Mom and Dad appeared almost instantly, their faces plastered with smiles and fake concern. "Madison, sweetie, you're back early," Mom said, her brow furrowed in what I now recognized as insincere worry. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I muttered. "Caleb canceled. Something came up." Their reactions were perfect, too perfect. Mom clicked her tongue sympathetically, and Dad gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. I had to fight the urge to recoil from his touch. That night, I lay awake for hours, their cruel words replaying in my mind. By morning, I had made my decision. After they left the house, I packed a duffel bag with my clothes and a few meaningful keepsakes. Without looking back, I left the Billy house and went straight to Grandma's. When she opened the door and saw me standing there with my bag, her eyes widened. "Madison, what's wrong, sweetheart?" I couldn't hold it in any longer. Tears poured down my face as I pulled out my phone and played the recording. As Grandma listened, her expression shifted: shock, disbelief, and finally, a deep, simmering anger. "Those conniving, heartless," she stopped herself, taking a deep breath before looking at me with soft, loving eyes. "Don't you worry, honey, we'll give them a surprise they'll never forget." She pulled me into a tight hug, and for the first time since hearing that awful conversation, I felt safe. That evening, my phone buzzed incessantly, calls and messages from Mom, Dad, and even Amber. At first, I ignored them, but eventually, I answered. "Hello," I said, my voice cold. "Madison," Mom's frantic voice came through. "Where are you? We've been so worried." I almost laughed at the irony. "I'm with Grandma," I replied calmly, "and we'd like to invite you all over tomorrow for a family conversation." There was a long silence before Mom stammered. "Of course, we'll be there, Madison. Honey, whatever's wrong, we'll fix it." I hung up before she could continue. Fix it? They had no idea what was coming. The next evening, the air was heavy with tension as the doorbell rang. Grandma gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before answering. Wayne and Abigail Billy stepped inside, their faces full of fake concern and affection. "Madison, sweetheart," Mom began, reaching out to me. I stepped back, watching confusion flicker across her face. Grandma's voice was calm but firm. "Please, have a seat. We have a lot to discuss." As they sat down, Dad's eyes darted around, taking in the signs of wealth. "Mom, what's this about? Is everything okay?" Without a word, I placed my phone on the table and pressed play. Their voices filled the room, cold, calculating, and damning. The effect was immediate. The color drained from their faces as they sat, wide-eyed and speechless. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Then they both began speaking at once, their voices a jumble of excuses and apologies. Grandma raised her hand, silencing them. When she spoke, her voice trembled with disappointment and barely controlled anger. "I hoped, truly believed, that you had changed," she said, her words deliberate and heavy. The realization was a tidal wave, washing over my parents as Grandma delivered her verdict. "I had considered dividing my estate among all of you," she said, her voice unwavering, "but now I see clearly. Everything I have will go to Madison, alone." Their faces fell, struck by the full weight of her words. Panic flickered in their eyes as the reality of their failed scheme set in. It wasn't just the money they'd lost, but also any chance of being part of a family grounded in love and trust. "Please, you have to understand," Mom's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. "We made mistakes, but we love Madison. We can fix this." She reached out, desperation etched into every word. When begging failed to soften Grandma's resolve, their tone turned venomous. Dad's face twisted with fury. "You can't do this. We're her parents, we have rights. We'll make sure you never see her again." Francesca. Their threats didn't faze me. For the first time, I felt a calm certainty about what I needed to do. I'm filing for emancipation, I said, my voice steady. Grandma will be my legal guardian. You won't have any control over me anymore. The shock on their faces would have been almost comical if it weren't so tragic. They looked between me and Grandma, realization dawning that their carefully laid plans had not just crumbled, they had completely backfired. I think it's time for you to leave, Grandma said firmly, her tone brooking no argument. She stood and gestured toward the door. After a moment of hesitation, they left, their defeat palpable. When the door closed behind them, I released a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Grandma enveloped me in a warm hug, and for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of peace. The weeks following the confrontation were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Grandma hired the best lawyers to help secure my emancipation and transfer guardianship to her. I had naively believed my parents would step aside once their deceit was exposed. I was wrong. Wayne and Abigail fought bitterly to retain control, clinging to the hope of accessing Grandma's wealth. But the evidence against them was overwhelming. Years of neglect and emotional abuse became the foundation of our case. Teachers from my schools testified about their absence, how they never came to parent-teacher conferences or attended my school events. My third-grade teacher, Mrs. Randy, recounted the time I won the spelling bee, and no one from my family showed up to celebrate. Even neighbors came forward, painting a stark contrast between the extravagant parties my sister Amber enjoyed and my overlooked birthdays. The final hearing came quickly. To my surprise, Amber walked into the courtroom, slipping quietly into the back. When she took the stand, her testimony dismantled the last remnants of my parents' defense. "Yes, Your Honor," Amber said, her voice calm and deliberate. "I knew about my parents' plan to use Madison to gain access to Grandma's money. The sudden kindness, the sisterly bonding, it was all part of the act." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. I sat frozen, struggling to process her words. She met my gaze briefly, and for a moment, I thought I saw regret in her eyes. But it was too late. Her admission was the final blow, severing any hope of reconciliation. The judge's decision was swift and unequivocal. Grandma was granted full guardianship, and I was emancipated from Wayne and Abigail Billy. As we left the courthouse, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in my life, I was free. The mansion I now called home became more than just a physical refuge, it was a sanctuary where I could heal and rebuild. Grandma's love was a constant, her encouragement a beacon as I navigated my new life. I poured myself into my studies, no longer burdened by the need to prove my worth to indifferent parents. For the first time, I was living for myself. Grandma supported me in every way she could, offering opportunities one had only dreamed of. But it was her unwavering belief in me that truly changed my life. "You can be anything you want to be, Madison," she'd say, her eyes sparkling with pride. "The world is yours." Together, we traveled the globe. In England, I fell in love with art and architecture. On a safari in Africa, I discovered a passion for wildlife photography. Each experience unearthed new facets of myself, helping me grow into the person I was always meant to be. But the most transformative work happened in the quiet office of Dr. Lucas, my therapist. Twice a week, I unpacked years of pain and learned to navigate my emotions. "It's okay to be angry," she told me once. "It's okay to grieve the family you should have had." Slowly, I began to trust again, not just others, but myself. The night before my high school graduation, Grandma and I sat on the patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. She reached over and took my hand, her expression tender. "I'm so proud of you, Madison. You've been through so much, and look at you now, you're stronger and more beautiful than ever." Tears welled in my eyes, but this time, they were tears of joy. "I couldn't have done it without you, Grandma. You saved me." She shook her head with a gentle smile. "No, sweetheart. You saved yourself. I just gave you the space to do it." The next day, as I stood on the stage accepting my diploma, I heard Grandma's cheers above everyone else's. A wave of peace washed over me. My past no longer defined me. Instead, it had forged me into someone stronger, ready to embrace the future. Looking out at the crowd, my eyes met Grandma's. In that moment, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I wouldn't face them alone.
I never intended to hide my success. Growing up in a modest Boston family, I learned early on that humility and perseverance mattered more than status. My father, a mechanic, would return home with grease-stained hands and a weary smile, while my mother worked back-to-back shifts as a nurse, determined to put me through college. Emily, she'd often say, success isn't measured by what you own, it's defined by who you are. Her words stayed with me. By 23, I had started a tech consulting firm in my garage. 2 years later, it had grown into MTech Solutions, now worth over $200 million. Yet, I kept a low profile, preferring the quiet satisfaction of working behind the scenes. Then I met Michael. Our paths crossed at a neighborhood coffee shop. I was absorbed in reviewing contracts, dressed in my usual jeans and sweater, when he accidentally knocked over my coffee. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, fumbling to save my papers. I couldn't help but laugh. "It's fine," I reassured him, even though those documents were acquisition agreements worth millions. His genuine panic was oddly charming. "Let me make it up to you," he insisted. "I'm Michael, by the way." "Emily," I said, smiling. "And sure, I'll take you up on that coffee." That coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into a relationship. Michael was unlike anyone I'd ever met, kind, down to earth, and a high school teacher who genuinely loved his job. He never asked about my wealth, mainly because he didn't know about it. I told him I worked as an executive assistant at MTech Solutions. It wasn't entirely untrue. I did oversee administrative tasks, though as the company's owner, not an assistant. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I had. Things were perfect until I met his mother, Victoria. Victoria Patterson was the picture of social ambition. Her home was filled with imitation designer goods, and her conversations revolved around imaginary connections to high society. From the start, she disapproved of me. "A secretary?" she asked during our first dinner, her tone sharp. "Michael, darling, wasn't there a surgeon's daughter I introduced you to?" "Mom," Michael said, clearly annoyed, but she pressed on. "I just think, given our family status, you should aim higher. The Pattersons have always married well." The irony wasn't lost on me. Michael had already shared the truth of their middle-class life, propped up by credit card debt and appearances. "I like my job," I replied simply. "It's fulfilling." Victoria sniffed dismissively. "Well, someone has to do those things, I suppose." Her passive-aggressive remarks became a fixture of family gatherings. At Christmas, while others received thoughtful gifts, I got a plain office planner. "For keeping your boss's schedule," she said with a smirk. Michael often apologized privately but never confronted her outright. I understood. Family dynamics can be tricky. Then came the announcement that changed everything. One Sunday dinner, Victoria stormed into the room, brandishing a newspaper. "MTech Solutions is looking for a new CEO. This is my chance." I nearly choked on my wine. While it was true we were seeking a CEO, the search was highly selective. "You're applying?" Michael asked, visibly surprised. "Of course. After 20 years in middle management, it's time I moved into the big leagues," she declared, turning to me. "Emily, put in a good word for me, would you? Though I doubt your recommendation carries much weight." I maintained a neutral expression. "I'll see what I can do." "Don't bother," she said with a wave. "I've already called in favors. The board will be impressed by my credentials." Little did she know, I was the board. The following week, Victoria arrived at MTech Solutions for her interview, dressed in an over-the-top suit. I watched from my private office as she loudly proclaimed her qualifications in the lobby. "Mrs. Patterson," my assistant called. "The board is ready for you." Victoria straightened her posture and marched into the conference room. She froze the moment she saw me seated at the head of the table, flanked by board members. "Emily," she sputtered. "What are you doing here?" "Running my company," I said evenly. "Please have a seat." Her face paled as the realization hit. This can't be." "It is," one board member confirmed. "Ms. Walker is our founder and majority shareholder." Victoria's carefully curated facade began to crumble. She stumbled into a chair as I opened her application file. "Let's discuss your qualifications," I said, my tone all business. Her resume was riddled with embellishments, and I questioned each one. Her fabricated achievements and supposed connections unraveled quickly under scrutiny. I think we're done here, I concluded. Your application is disqualified due to misrepresentation. You can't do this, she cried. This is personal. No, it's professional, I replied. But since you brought up personal matters, yes, I've endured your insults and condescension for months. This isn't revenge, Victoria. It's accountability. She stormed out, muttering threats about exposing me to Michael. Go ahead, I thought, already reaching for my phone. It was time Michael knew the truth. Mom just called me crying, Michael said as he walked into my office, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. She said, "You're her boss? Emily, what's going on?" I motioned for him to sit down, taking a deep breath. Michael, there's a lot I need to explain. I wasn't completely honest about who I am. I didn't want to complicate things between us, but now it's unavoidable. Can I show you something? Minutes later, Michael stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in my office, his eyes scanning the breathtaking view of the city and the nameplate on my desk, Emily Walker, founder and CEO. He turned to the wall of awards and newspaper articles featuring my company MTech Solutions. So, you're not a secretary, he said, his voice measured. No, I'm not, I admitted, standing beside him. I founded MTech when I was 23. The company your mom mocked me for working at? I built it from the ground up. He looked at me, hurt flashing in his eyes. Why would you hide something like this? Why lie? I wanted someone to see me, not my bank account, I said. Do you know how many people have tried to get close to me because of my money or status? I wanted to experience love for who I am, not for what I own. Michael sighed, his expression softening. I understand that, but you let my mother treat you horribly. You could have stopped this months ago. And what would that have accomplished? I asked. Proving her obsession with status, right? That wealth is what defines someone's value. I didn't want to play her game. Michael ran a hand through his hair. You're right. I should have defended you. I failed you there. Before I could respond, the office door burst open, and Victoria stormed in, dragging her husband George behind her. Her face was red with fury. There she is, the liar, the manipulator, she screeched. George, ever the quiet observer, stepped forward. Emily, this feels inappropriate. Using your position to reject Victoria over personal disagreements. I recorded the entire interview, I said, cutting him off. With the press of a button, Victoria's stumbling responses played over the speaker. This wasn't personal. Your wife lied on her application and misrepresented her qualifications. The board made their decision based on facts. Victoria's face twisted with rage. You think you've won? Just wait until everyone hears about this. The so-called genius CEO who pretended to be a secretary just to trick her way into our family. Mom, stop. Michael's voice thundered, silencing the room. Just stop. Do you hear yourself? You're humiliating all of us. Humiliating? She's the liar here. Victoria spat. No, Michael said firmly. Emily lied about one thing, her job. You've lied about everything else. Our family status, your connections, your accomplishments. It's all been a facade, and I'm done enabling it. Victoria's mouth fell open, and George placed a hand on her shoulder. Let's go, Victoria, he murmured. This has gone too far. This isn't over, she hissed as he led her out. You'll regret this, both of you. As the doors slammed behind them, silence filled the office. Michael turned to me, his face weary but resolute. I'm sorry for everything my family's put you through, but I need to know, where do we go from here? Before I could answer, my assistant buzzed in. Ms. Walker, sorry to interrupt, but Mrs. Patterson is in the lobby, causing a scene. Security is asking how to proceed. Michael and I exchanged a look. We handle it together, he said. I pressed the intercom, send security footage to my laptop and stand by. Only intervene if she disrupts operations. On the screen, we watched Victoria pacing the lobby, stopping employees to rant about me. Most ignored her, some rolling their eyes. But then she pulled out her phone. She's stealing clients, Victoria shouted, waving the phone in the air. I have proof right here, financial documents from Patterson Insurance. My blood ran cold. Those are confidential. How did she get them? Michael's face paled. She works in middle management at Patterson. She must have accessed the files. I was already dialing. Mr. Patterson, this is Emily Walker. Your employee, Victoria Patterson, is in my lobby threatening to expose confidential client information. Yes, I'll hold. Victoria's voice blared over the feed. I'll ruin her. She's been poaching our best clients. A sharp voice cut through the chaos on the screen. Victoria Patterson. A poised woman in a suit approached, flanked by two men. I'm Susan Chen, legal counsel for Patterson Insurance. You're hereby suspended pending investigation for violation of your non-disclosure agreement and attempted corporate espionage. Victoria stumbled back. No, you don't understand. We understand perfectly, Susan said coldly. Your access to confidential files has been monitored for weeks. This public outburst only confirmed our suspicions. Michael watched in stunned silence as his mother was escorted away, her protests growing fainter. He turned to me. Emily, I didn't know she was capable of this. It's not your fault, I said gently, but we need to address this openly, with your family, with mine, and with ourselves. Michael nodded, his voice steady. Together. As security led a stunned Victoria out of the building, Michael turned to me, his brow furrowed. You knew about her job performance? I found out during the merger discussions, I admitted. I planned to help her transition into a role better suited to her skills. That's part of why I kept my identity hidden. I needed to fully understand the situation before making decisions that would impact your family. Mr. Patterson, standing nearby, shook his head with a faint smile. Always thinking of others, Emily. It's one of the reasons I agreed to the merger in the first place. He straightened his jacket and added, Don't worry about Victoria. We'll handle the legal aspects with discretion for Michael's sake. After he left, silence settled in the office. Michael sat across from me, staring out the window, lost in thought. I need some time, he said at last. This is a lot. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. Take all the time you need. At the door, he paused, looking back at me. For what it's worth, I fell in love with Emily the secretary. Knowing you're Emily the CEO doesn't change that. It just means I have more to learn about you. After he left, I remained at my desk, watching the city lights flicker on as night fell. My phone buzzed. A message from George, Michael's father. Victoria's home, devastated. She knows what she's lost. When you're ready, we should talk. All of us. Family shouldn't end like this. The week that followed, I buried myself in work, giving Michael and his family the space they needed. Meanwhile, the media caught wind of Victoria's public meltdown. Corporate espionage involving two merging companies was too scandalous to ignore. Fortunately, both companies' PR teams managed to keep the damage under control. One late evening, as I was reviewing merger documents, my assistant buzzed in. Ms. Walker, the Patterson family is here to see you. They entered together, George leading with calm authority, Michael, his expression unreadable, and finally Victoria, her usual confidence replaced by a tentative, vulnerable air. She wore simple business attire, a stark contrast to her usual designer wardrobe. Emily, George began, his tone measured. We need to talk. All of us. Victoria stepped forward, wringing her hands. I've been in therapy this past week, intensive sessions. Losing the promotion, it broke me. Everything I built my identity around, my importance, my connections, it all crumbled. You tried to hold on by grabbing more, I said quietly. She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. When I saw the CEO posting, I convinced myself I deserved it, that everyone else had been holding me back. Then learning the truth about you, it shattered what little I had left. Mom, Michael said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder, there's more you need to tell her. Victoria took a shaky breath. I've struggled for years. Shopping addiction, fabricating stories about our family's status. It all started when George's business hit trouble a decade ago. Instead of facing reality, I created a fantasy. It felt easier than admitting we weren't who I pretended us to be. George spoke up, his voice heavy with regret. And I enabled it. I thought keeping up appearances would keep us afloat. But it only made things worse. The merger, is it still happening? I nodded. Yes. Victoria's actions hurt both companies, but they don't erase 2 decades of service. The merger includes a retirement package for long-term employees. It's hers if she wants it. Victoria's eyes widened in disbelief. After everything I've done, everyone deserves a second chance, I said, But there are conditions: continued therapy, working with HR on a transition plan, and most importantly, honesty with yourself and others. Victoria broke down, her carefully constructed walls finally crumbling. I'm sorry, Emily, for everything. For how I treated you, the things I said. Michael moved to my side and took my hand. We've all learned something, he said. Mom about honesty, Dad about enabling, me about standing up for what's right, and Emily about trusting people with the truth. I finished, moving forward. 2 months later, Victoria retired quietly. The merger proceeded smoothly, and she found new purpose volunteering at a financial literacy program, helping others avoid the mistakes she made. At her wedding the following spring, she gave a heartfelt speech that left few dry eyes. A year ago, I thought status and appearances were everything, but my daughter-in-law taught me that true worth lies in how you treat others. Emily, thank you for giving our family a second chance, not because you're a CEO, but because you're a compassionate human being. Michael squeezed my hand under the table. We had rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of truth, moving past lies and pretenses. Looking around, I saw our merged family, George chatting with my father about business, Victoria helping my mother arrange flowers, our employees meeting with relatives. Success, I realized, meant nothing without people to share it with. Happy, Michael whispered. Very, I replied with a grin. Though I do miss that secretary desk sometimes. He laughed. Well, you did say your assistant's going on maternity leave. Don't tempt me, I teased. I might just go undercover again. Victoria overheard and joined our laughter, genuine this time, free from pretense. She found something far more valuable than status: peace with who she truly was. As the celebration continued, I thought back to that first accidental coffee spill. It had led to this moment, proving that sometimes life's biggest blessings come disguised as chaos. Looking around at the people I loved, I knew success wasn't measured in dollars or titles. It was measured in second chances, hard truths, and the courage to be authentically yourself. I've always believed that true character reveals itself in how people treat those they think can't benefit them. My name is Emma Miller, and this is how I learned just how right that belief was. Growing up, my parents taught me the value of hard work and humility. My father was a janitor at a prestigious tech company, and my mother cleaned houses for wealthy families. They worked themselves to the bone to give me an education, often going without so I could have what I needed. Emma, sweetheart, my mother would say, her hands rough from years of scrubbing. Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take from you. Those words echoed in my mind as I worked my way through college, studying finance and computer science. By day, I attended classes. By night, I cleaned offices just like my father. But I had a secret that kept me going. I was developing a revolutionary financial algorithm that could predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. During my final year, while most students were partying, I was perfecting my program. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. My algorithm caught the attention of a major investment firm. They offered me $75 million for it, plus a position on their board. I accepted the deal but kept my wealth hidden. I continued living modestly, investing wisely, and growing my fortune quietly. That's when I met James. He literally ran into me at a small cafe where I was working on my laptop. Hot coffee splashed across the table, barely missing my computer. Oh God, I'm so sorry, he exclaimed, frantically grabbing napkins. His genuine distress made me laugh. It's okay, I assured him, helping to clean up. I'm Emma. James, please let me buy you another coffee. It's the least I can do. One coffee led to dinner, and dinner led to more. James was kind, funny, and refreshingly down to earth. He worked as a high school teacher, passionate about making a difference in his students' lives. When he proposed 6 months later, I said yes without hesitation. Then I met his family. Patricia, my mother-in-law, lived in a sprawling house in an upscale neighborhood. Her husband, Robert, had passed away years ago, leaving her a comfortable inheritance. From our first meeting, she made it clear I wasn't what she'd envisioned for her son. A cleaner's daughter, she said, eyeing me over her wine glass. How quaint. James, darling, I thought you were dating that lovely doctor's daughter, Caroline. Mom, James warned, but the tone was set. At every family gathering, Patricia found ways to remind me of my place. She'd ask me to help the catering staff, claiming I feel more comfortable in the kitchen. When James defended me, she'd laugh it off as just trying to make Emma feel at home. Her daughter, my sister-in-law Amanda, was cut from the same cloth. A successful real estate agent, she never missed an opportunity to flaunt her success or remind me of my humble beginnings. Emma, dear, she'd say with false sweetness, I have some clients looking for a cleaning service. Should I give them your mother's number? I took it all in stride, partly because I knew the truth about my wealth, but mostly because I wanted to see people's true colors. James would squeeze my hand under the table, whispering apologies for his family's behavior, but never truly standing up to them. What they didn't know was that I had plans of my own. I've been quietly buying properties throughout the city, including several in Patricia's prestigious neighborhood. The mansion next door to hers had been on the market for months, and through a series of shell companies, I acquired it for $12 million. The annual family reunion was approaching, a 3-day affair where relatives from across the country gathered at Patricia's house. This year, however, would be different. James, honey, Patricia announced at dinner a week before the reunion. I've arranged the guest rooms. You'll stay in your old room, of course. Emma can use the basement. We need the good rooms for family who actually contribute to our gatherings. James shifted uncomfortably. Mom, Emma's my wife. And as my daughter-in-law, she should be grateful for whatever accommodation she receives. Patricia cut in smoothly. Besides, with her background, she's probably used to much worse. I simply smiled and said, the basement will be fine, Patricia. If only she knew what was coming. The reunion began on a Friday. Cars filled Patricia's circular driveway as family members arrived. I helped carry luggage, served drinks, and endured the usual snide comments about my background. That evening, as everyone settled into their luxurious guest rooms, I made my way to the basement with my small suitcase. The basement was cold and musty, with a narrow cot set up in the corner. As I sat on the creaking bed, I heard laughter floating down from above. Patricia's voice carried clearly through the vents. Can you believe she actually took the basement without complaint? I told James he should have married Caroline. At least she knows how to carry herself in proper society. More laughter followed. I checked my phone. One new message from my property manager. Everything is ready for tomorrow's inspection, Mrs. Miller. The mansion next door has been fully furnished according to your specifications. I smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow would certainly be interesting. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. I woke early, my back aching from the basement cot, and made my way upstairs. The kitchen was already bustling with activity as Patricia directed the catering staff for the day's brunch. Oh, Emma. Good. Since you're up, make yourself useful and help Maria with the dishes, Patricia commanded, not even looking in my direction. And do try to stay out of sight when the guests arrive. We have some very important people coming today. I caught James' eye as he entered the kitchen. He looked pained but remained silent, reaching for his coffee. The familiar sting of his passive acceptance made me straighten my shoulders. Just a few more hours. Actually, I said calmly, checking my watch, I have an appointment this morning. Patricia's head snapped up. An appointment? During our family reunion? How incredibly rude. Now, Mom, James began weakly, but Amanda cut him off as she swept into the kitchen. Mother, the Hendersons just pulled up. You know, the ones who bought that gorgeous mansion next door. She smirked at me. They're my biggest clients this year. The sale was worth millions in commission. Patricia preened. Wonderful. Emma, before you leave for whatever menial task you have planned, at least make yourself useful and help serve the Moses. I smiled. I really must go. My real estate agent is waiting. Real estate agent? Amanda scoffed. What, are you looking at studio apartments in the bad part of town? The doorbell rang, and Patricia hurried to answer it, shooting me a warning look. I followed the group into the grand foyer, where a sophisticated woman in a sharp suit waited. Good morning, Mrs. Miller, she said, smiling directly at me. The mansion is ready for your final inspection. The room fell silent. Patricia's carefully crafted smile froze on her face. There must be some mistake, she said with a forced laugh. Emma isn't. Emma Miller, I confirmed, stepping forward. Owner of the mansion next door. Amanda's mimosa glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. That's impossible. I handled that sale. Through my shell corporation, yes, I said pleasantly. I believe your commission check was quite substantial. James stared at me, his coffee cup suspended halfway to his mouth. Emma, what's going on? Perhaps we should all sit down, I suggested, gesturing to the living room. I have quite a story to tell. Once everyone was seated, Patricia and Amanda perched on the edge of their seats like birds ready to take flight. I began. 7 years ago, I developed a financial algorithm that sold for $75 million, I said calmly. Since then, my investments have multiplied that many times over. The mansion next door is just one of many properties I own. But you let us think, Patricia sputtered, that I was a cleaning lady's daughter who married above her station. I finished. Yes, I did. And you all showed me exactly who you are through how you treated someone you thought was beneath you. This is absurd. Amanda stood up, her face flushed. Mother, she's clearly lying. My real estate agent cleared her throat. I can assure you, Mrs. Henderson, that Mrs. Miller's credentials are impeccable. In fact, she owns controlling interest in the development company that built this entire neighborhood. Patricia's face had gone from red to white. The entire neighborhood. Including this house, I confirmed quietly. I bought it last month when it was technically still under your late husband's estate. The paperwork was finalized yesterday. The silence that followed was deafening. James had sunk into his chair, his face a mask of shock and dawning realization. You mean? Patricia's voice trembled. This isn't my house anymore. It's mine, I said simply. Just like the basement where you made me sleep last night. Amanda jumped up. Mother, she can't do this. We'll fight it in court. You're welcome to try, I replied. My lawyers have ensured everything is perfectly legal. But right now, I'd like you both to leave my house. Leave, Patricia gasped. But where will I go? This is my home. Was your home, I corrected. Don't worry, I've arranged for temporary accommodations for you. There's a modest apartment available in the building where my parents used to work as janitors. I hear the basement unit is particularly cozy. The family gathering had devolved into chaos. Relatives whispered among themselves, some looking shocked, others secretly pleased to see Patricia's pride take such a fall. James finally found his voice. Emma, why didn't you tell me? He asked quietly. I turned to face my husband. Would it have made a difference? Would you have stood up to your mother's treatment of me if you'd known I was wealthy? Because if money is what it takes to earn basic respect in this family, then we have bigger problems than where I sleep. The real estate agent cleared her throat. Mrs. Miller, shall we proceed with the inspection of your new property? Yes, I said, standing. Patricia, I'll have my staff help you pack. You have until tomorrow evening to vacate the premises. As I walked toward the door, Patricia's voice rang out, suddenly honeyed and pleading. Emma, dear, surely we can discuss this. We're family, after all. I paused at the doorway, turning back to face her. Family? Let's talk about family, Patricia. Last Christmas, you seated me at the children's table and told everyone it was because I wouldn't know how to behave at the adults' dinner. Last month, you accidentally excluded me from James' birthday celebration. And just yesterday, you made me sleep in a basement because you said I wasn't good enough for a real room. I didn't mean, she stammered. Yes, you did, I said firmly. You meant every slight, every insult, every attempt to humiliate me. You showed me exactly who you are, Patricia. Now I'm showing you exactly who I am. The sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor echoed through the silent house as I walked out, head held high. Behind me, I could hear Patricia's sobs and Amanda's angry protests, but I didn't look back. The following weeks were a storm of activity and emotions. Patricia and Amanda moved out as required, though not without drama. They hired lawyers, of course, but as my legal team had predicted, every transaction was ironclad. I moved into the mansion next door, leaving James to decide his own path. The distance gave me time to think about our marriage and what it meant to build a life with someone who couldn't stand up for you. One evening, about a month after the revelation, my security team alerted me to a visitor. James stood at my front door, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. Can we talk? He asked quietly. I led him to my home office, a warm room filled with family photos, including one of my parents on their 30th anniversary. James' eyes fixed on it as he sat down. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began. About everything. About us. I've also been seeing a therapist. I waited, letting him find his words. I failed you, Emma, not just at the reunion, but every time I let my mother treat you like you were beneath us. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but really, I was just being a coward. Yes, you were, I agreed softly. He winced but continued. The thing is, I kept wondering why you didn't tell me about your success. Then I remembered last Thanksgiving when Mom made that comment about your father being just a janitor, and I laughed. I actually laughed. Tears formed in his eyes. That's when you were going to tell me, wasn't it? I nodded. I had the papers in my bag. But watching you laugh at your own father-in-law, I realized that you were just like them. I was, he admitted. And that shame is mine to carry. But Emma, I want you to know what's happened since he left. He straightened in his chair. I resigned from my teaching position at Brighton Prep. This surprised me. James had taught at the prestigious private school for years. I took a job at Riverside High School instead, he continued. It's in the neighborhood where you grew up. The kids there, they remind me of you. Brilliant, determined, just needing someone to believe in them. And your mother? I haven't spoken to her since she moved out. She and Amanda have been trying to rally the family against you, but it backfired. Cousin Sarah came forward about how Mom had treated her when she married beneath her station. Then Uncle Robert shared stories about her behavior toward his second wife. It's like, your courage in standing up to her gave others permission to speak their truth. I absorbed this information, noting the changes in James. He seemed more grounded, more present. There's more, he said. I've been volunteering at the community center where your mom used to work. Did you know they have a program teaching financial literacy to cleaning staff and janitors? I'm helping them expand it. Why are you telling me all this, James? Because I want to earn back your respect, he said simply. Not because you're wealthy, but because you're the same amazing woman who helped me grade papers until midnight and made soup when I was sick. I was too weak to deserve you before. I want to become someone who does. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Patricia. Your mother's at the apartment building, I told James. She's demanding to speak with me. You don't have to go, he said quickly. Actually, I think I do. I found Patricia in the basement apartment where she now lived. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Her designer clothes looked out of place against the concrete walls. Hello, Patricia. She turned, and I was struck by how different she looked. The carefully maintained facade had cracked, showing the insecure woman beneath. Emma, she said, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Finally, she whispered, I understand now. Understand what? What it feels like, to be judged by where you live, to have people look down on you. Her hands trembled. Yesterday, I couldn't get a restaurant reservation because of my new address. Me, I've been going there for 20 years. Feels awful, doesn't it? She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I've been horrible, not just to you, but to so many people. Living here, being treated the way I treated others, it's opened my eyes. That was the point, I said quietly. She looked up sharply. You mean, this wasn't just revenge? Revenge would have been making you homeless. This was about education. Patricia sank onto the small sofa. I've lost everything. My home, my social standing, my son. You haven't lost James, I corrected. He's choosing to be his own man for the first time. Whether you lose him permanently depends on whether you can accept that change. And you? She asked hesitantly. Have I lost you as a daughter-in-law? I studied her carefully. That depends on you too, Patricia. Real change takes more than a few weeks of humility. Will you help me? She asked softly. I don't mean financially. I mean help me learn to be better. It was the first time I'd ever heard genuine vulnerability in her voice. 6 months later, I hosted a dinner party. Patricia was there, wearing a simple dress rather than her usual designer labels. She helped in the kitchen not because anyone asked her to, but because she wanted to. Amanda came too, having recently started volunteering at a women's shelter, a requirement I'd added to release when she asked to rent one of my properties. James and I were still working on our marriage, taking things day by day. He'd proven his commitment to change not through grand gestures, but through consistent actions and unwavering support. As we sat down to dinner, I looked around the table. My parents were there, my father deep in conversation with James about the financial literacy program, which had expanded to 3 more community centers. My mother and Patricia were exchanging recipes, their previous class barriers dissolved. Emma, Patricia said during dessert, I wanted to thank you. For what? for teaching me that true worth isn't about where you live or what you own. It's about how you treat people. She smiled sadly. I just wish I'd learned that lesson sooner. Later that night, as James and I stood on our balcony overlooking the neighborhood, he asked, "Do you regret any of it?" I thought about the past year, the pain, the growth, the transformations. No, I said finally. Sometimes people need to lose everything to understand what really matters. He took my hand, and we stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. The basement apartment where Patricia lived was visible from our vantage point, its lights glowing warmly in the darkness. It stood as a reminder that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to become better than they were. My phone buzzed. A message from my investment team about another successful algorithm deployment. But for once, I didn't check it immediately. Some things were more valuable than money, and I was finally surrounded by people who understood that truth.
Hi, my name is Emily. I'm 34 years old, and until a year ago, I thought I had the perfect life, a loving husband, a stepdaughter I adored, and a career I was proud of. But all that changed when I discovered just how far someone could go to tear apart a family. When I married my husband, Michael, 3 years ago, I knew his 14-year-old daughter, Chloe, would be a part of the package. She was bright, a little shy, and still adjusting to her parents' divorce. I did everything I could to make her feel loved and supported. I helped with her homework, attended her school plays, and planned fun weekend outings. But as time went on, things began to shift. Chloe grew distant, and her behavior changed. At first, I thought it was just teenage angst, but soon, I realized there was more to the story. It started with small things, missing items around the house, snide comments muttered under her breath, and a sudden unwillingness to spend time with me. Then came the accusations. "Dad, Emily doesn't like me," she told Michael one evening after dinner. Michael looked at me, confused. "What are you talking about, Chloe? Emily's always been kind to you." Chloe crossed her arms and gave me a glare. "You don't see the way she talks to me when you're not around." I was stunned. "Chloe, that's not true. I've never said anything mean to you." But the doubt was already planted in Michael's mind. Over the next few months, Chloe's accusations escalated. She claimed I ignored her, blamed her for things I didn't do, and even made up stories about me yelling at her when Michael wasn't home. One night, Michael confronted me. "Emily, Chloe says you've been treating her unfairly. What's going on?" I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. "Michael, none of that is true. I don't know why she's saying these things." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what to believe anymore." The tension in our home was unbearable. Michael was caught between his daughter and me, and no matter how much I tried to prove my innocence, Chloe always found a way to make me look like the villain. The final straw came on Chloe's 15th birthday. I had spent weeks planning a special day for her, a surprise party with all her friends, her favorite cake, and decorations in her favorite colors. But when she walked in, instead of being happy, she burst into tears. "Why did you do this without asking me?" she sobbed. "You ruined everything." Michael rushed to her side, glaring at me. "Emily, why would you plan something she didn't want?" I was heartbroken. I thought she'd like it. I was trying to make her happy. Chloe stormed out, leaving me standing there in front of the confused guests. It was clear that no matter what I did, I could never win. After Chloe's meltdown at her birthday party, everything spiraled out of control. Michael's trust in me eroded even further, and I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. Chloe's behavior grew bolder. She started twisting my words, fabricating events that never happened, and constantly playing the victim. One day, Michael confronted me with something that left me speechless. "Chloe told me you said she wasn't welcome in this house anymore. Is that true?" I felt my stomach drop. "What? Michael, I would never say that. She said you told her yesterday, after I left for work." He pressed, his tone sharp. "Michael, I've spent the last 2 days preparing her favorite meal and cleaning up for her study group. Why would I do that if I didn't want her here? But no matter how much I tried to explain, Chloe's tears and trembling voice always seemed to win him over. One evening, I overheard Chloe talking on the phone in her room. Her door was slightly ajar, and I couldn't help but listen. "She's going to leave soon. I know it. Dad can't stand how she treats me. I just have to keep this up a little longer," she whispered, laughing softly. I froze in place, my heart pounding. This wasn't a misunderstanding, this was deliberate. Chloe was orchestrating my downfall, and Michael was falling for it. I knew I had to act, but how could I prove what I heard without coming across as paranoid or vindictive? Things came to a head one fateful night. Michael came home from work, his expression unreadable. He sat me down in the living room, Chloe lurking in the background with a smug smile on her face. "Emily, I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice trembling. "Chloe feels unsafe around you, and I can't have that in my house. I think it's best if you stay somewhere else for a while." Tears welled up in my eyes. "Michael, are you serious? You're asking me to leave because of lies she's telling you?" "I don't know what's true anymore," he admitted, looking away. Chloe smirked behind him, a look of triumph flashing across her face. With a heavy heart, I packed a bag and left the house that night, but as I walked out the door, I promised myself one thing: I would not let Chloe win. Staying at a friend's place gave me time to think. I went over every interaction, every argument, and every detail that might prove my innocence. Chloe's behavior wasn't just a rebellious teenager acting out, it was manipulative and calculated. I decided to take a bold step. If Chloe wanted to destroy me, I would fight back, but not in anger. I would do it with the truth. First, I reached out to a family therapist, explaining the situation and asking for advice. Then, I began documenting everything: texts, notes, overheard conversations, even comments Chloe made in front of others. The first step to regaining control was building an undeniable case, and I was ready to see it through. With my plan in place, I started gathering evidence to expose Chloe's lies. The family therapist I consulted emphasized the importance of a calm, methodical approach. Chloe's manipulative tactics relied on creating chaos, and I needed to counter that with clarity and proof. One day, I decided to visit Chloe's school. I had always respected her privacy, but I suspected that her behavior at home might mirror her behavior elsewhere. I met with her guidance counselor, Mrs. Adams, under the guise of discussing Chloe's academic progress. Mrs. Adams greeted me warmly but looked hesitant. "Actually, I've been meaning to speak with someone about Chloe. She's incredibly bright, but I've noticed some concerning patterns. She often blames others when things don't go her way and can be, let's say, manipulative in social settings." Hearing this validated everything I had been experiencing. "Has she ever mentioned any issues at home?" I asked cautiously. "She's brought up some conflicts," Mrs. Adams said delicately. "But the stories don't always align. I've been hesitant to intervene without concrete evidence." Her words were a revelation. Chloe's behavior wasn't just targeted at me, it was a consistent pattern. Back at my temporary residence, I combed through old texts and emails. I even found a journal Chloe had accidentally left out one day, a collection of her grievances, twisted half-truths, and fabricated stories about me. One entry stood out: "If Dad thinks she's the bad guy, I can finally get the attention I deserve." It was chilling to read, but it solidified my resolve. Chloe's actions were rooted in insecurity, but they were causing real harm. The turning point came when I received an unexpected text from one of Chloe's friends, Mia. She'd overheard Chloe bragging about how she got rid of me and felt compelled to reach out. She said it was all part of her plan to make you look bad. "I thought you should know," Mia wrote. Armed with this message and the growing mountain of evidence, I knew it was time to confront Michael. But I also wanted Chloe to face the consequences of her actions in a way that encouraged accountability rather than outright punishment. I arranged a meeting at the therapist's office, where I presented my findings to Michael. As I spoke, I could see the realization dawning on his face. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, guilt evident in his eyes. "I tried, Michael. But you were too blinded by Chloe's manipulation to see it," I replied. "I love her, but this behavior has to stop, for everyone's sake." When Chloe was brought into the session, her initial defiance quickly crumbled under the weight of the evidence. The therapist guided the conversation, ensuring it remained constructive. I wanted you to notice me more," Chloe admitted tearfully. "It felt like she was taking you away from me." For the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of the vulnerable teenager Chloe truly was beneath the scheming facade. It was clear she needed help, and as a family, we committed to getting it for her. But I also made it clear, I wouldn't tolerate being treated as a scapegoat anymore. Boundaries were set, and Michael apologized profusely for doubting me. The confrontation in the therapist's office marked a turning point, but it wasn't the end of the journey, it was only the beginning. Michael was overcome with remorse for his earlier behavior. He took me out to dinner to apologize properly, away from the tension of home. "I should have trusted you," he admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. I let Chloe's words cloud my judgment because I was so scared of losing her too. "I see now how much I've hurt you." Hearing those words felt like a balm on my wounds, but trust isn't repaired with an apology alone. I told him, "I'm willing to try, but we both need to work on rebuilding what we've lost." He agreed, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were truly on the same team. With therapy, Chloe began to open up about her feelings of abandonment after her mother left. Her manipulative behavior was a misguided cry for attention and control. While her progress was slow, there were signs of change. She began apologizing more sincerely and even took steps to mend our relationship. One evening, she handed me a card that read, "I'm sorry for what I did. I hope we can start over." It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I also had to establish firm boundaries. Chloe needed to understand that manipulation wouldn't be tolerated. Michael and I agreed to a united front, no more taking sides. We created family rules, one of which included weekly family dinners where everyone shared their highs and lows of the week. It was awkward at first, but gradually, we found moments of connection. A few months later, Michael surprised me with a weekend getaway. "You deserve a break," he said with a smile. It was a gesture that reminded me of the man I fell in love with. Meanwhile, Chloe continued therapy and slowly began to rebuild her relationships, not just with me but also with her peers. Her transformation wasn't overnight, but she was putting in the work.
When my relatives saw the beautifully arranged quality meat courses delivered, they all exclaimed, "Wow, that looks delicious, this is so fancy," but in front of me, there was only a solitary cup of tea. My mother-in-law peeked out from behind the door, grinning in a sly, almost childish way. How typical, I thought. Even today, she couldn't resist trying to torment me. I blurted out, "It's been so long since the family got together. Delicious food should be enjoyed by everyone in the family, right?" But her food grudges were legendary, and I decided it was time to teach her a lesson. "My name is Sarah, I'm 35 years old, and I work in an office. I live with my husband, Jake, who is the youngest of 3 brothers. Jake is kind, easygoing, and we've been married for 5 years. We don't have kids yet, but I've recently started trying to get pregnant. Every time I see my mother-in-law, she pesters me with, 'Still no grandkids?' I've been carefully watching my sleep, nutrition, and timing, but there's one thing holding me back. I'll likely need her help if I have a child." She's almost 66, divorced, and living alone, but she's still active and works part-time. Despite that, it's clear she despises me. To her, I'm the woman who stole her precious youngest son. Once, when Jake and I visited her, he stepped away to use the bathroom. The moment he left, she shot me a sharp look and said, "Sarah, hasn't Jake gained weight?" I shook my head. "I don't think so." "Oh, he definitely has. It's your duty to keep your husband healthy. If he gains weight, he'll get sick. What are you feeding him? Greasy junk food? I was dumbfounded. I try to prepare balanced meals. And besides, I can't control what Jake eats at work or when he's out with friends. Maybe it would be more effective to mention this to him directly, I said, trying to stay calm. What? That would hurt his feelings. It's your job to look after him. I sighed inwardly. Do I really have to babysit a grown man? When Jake returned, I asked him outright, Honey, have you gained weight recently? Huh? No, actually, I've lost a little, he said. The air froze. My mother-in-law's face turned pale as she snapped. Lost weight? Sarah, are you starving him? She suddenly flipped her accusation, claiming I wasn't feeding him enough. Jake looked bewildered. Mom, that's not true. Everything's fine. But she was relentless. If people start gossiping that you're a terrible wife because Jake looks too skinny, it'll be your fault. Sarah. I was speechless. Whether Jake gains or loses weight, I'm the one getting blamed. The tea-only dinners. Visiting her house for dinner is no better. She insists we come over often, so we do, mostly out of politeness. She serves beautifully plated seasonal dishes, fresh raw fish, seasonal vegetables, warm corn soup, and fried rice. Everyone is served, except me. All I get is a cup of tea. Once, I tried to clarify. I didn't say I wasn't hungry. Oh, but you said you didn't want anything, didn't you? She said, feigning innocence. I didn't say that. Well, sorry, I must have misunderstood. You know, I'm just an old lady. At first, I believed her, but the pattern repeated every time. She'd apologize with her classic line, I'm just a forgetful old woman, leaving me unable to call her out without looking petty. Finally, I had enough. After being served only tea for the third time, I stood up. Let me help you, Mom, I said, heading to the kitchen. I served myself some rice and soup and then sat down, grabbing a few side dishes from Jake's plate. She frowned. Sarah, I told you to stay out of the kitchen, and now you're taking your husband's food? I smiled sweetly. Your cooking is just so delicious. I couldn't resist. Jake looked uncomfortable, but finally spoke up. Come on, Mom, this isn't like you. There's no reason to give Sarah a hard time. Oh, no, it's not like that, she stammered. It was just an old habit. I must have miscounted. Her excuse was weak, and I was now sure her actions were deliberate. Turning the tables, the next time we visited, she prepared chicken and eggs for the main course, foods I couldn't eat because of allergies. When I stared at my cup of tea, wondering what to do, Jake stepped in. Mom, you remember Sarah can't eat chicken and eggs, right? Did you make something else for her? Caught off guard, she stammered. Oh, of course, I thought I'd order takeout for her. Sarah, pick whatever you'd like. I smiled. Thank you, I'll have fries. Her face twitched, but she couldn't back out. When the fries arrived late, I savored them, ignoring her displeasure. Small victories like these remind me to stay resilient. One day, I'll do more than just hold my ground. I'll teach her that respect goes both ways. I slightly regretted ordering fries. I knew my mother-in-law wouldn't let it slide and would probably make some snide comment like, fries are for children. I also decided not to mention that I could eat eggs as long as they weren't raw. There was no point in giving her ammunition. The petty battle between us continued. Once, I proudly brought over some homemade dishes under the guise of sharing. I prepared seasoned rice and simmered vegetables, packing them neatly in a container. I thought, if there's no meal for me, at least I can eat this. But my mother-in-law was one step ahead. Why did you bring something so dirty? She asked, frowning in exaggerated disgust. Dirty? I was taken aback. The rice and vegetables, everything's brown. You should think about presentation, she sneered, sounding like a self-proclaimed aristocrat. But it's delicious, I countered. I came up with the recipe myself. You really have no taste, she said bluntly, so careless and no sense of refinement at all. For some reason, this time she didn't hold back and insulted me outright. Then, as if to add insult to injury, she picked up my container and dumped its contents into the trash. It had gone bad, she said with a dismissive wave. My anger boiled over. That's not possible. At that moment, Jake walked in. What's going on? Why are you shouting? My mother-in-law's fierce expression instantly morphed into a sweet smile. Oh, Sarah's cooking had gone bad, so I threw it out. Jake frowned. That's too bad, it's usually so tasty. Tasty? That brown food? She muttered under her breath. I was livid. Wasting food is something I simply cannot forgive. That day, as usual, I had only tea. I drank it down defiantly while my mother-in-law smirked, clearly enjoying my frustration. A festive family gathering. A week later, we all gathered for my niece's birthday, Jake's 3 brothers, their families, and several relatives we hadn't seen since our wedding were there. The atmosphere was lively, with laughter and chatter filling the air. The tables were pushed together in the recreation room, creating a long banquet setup. My mother-in-law spared no expense for the occasion. The table was lavishly set with appetizers, soup, salad, steak, mashed potatoes, and desserts, all restaurant-quality dishes. Everyone marveled at the spread, exclaiming, "Wow, this looks amazing, and so luxurious." Pleased with the praise, my mother-in-law said, "I indulged because it's been so long since the whole family got together. Let's enjoy these delicious dishes together." But at my seat, as always, there was only tea. My mother-in-law peeked out from behind a sliding door, smirking at me. Even on such a joyous occasion, she found a way to torment me. I felt conflicted. If I pointed out the lack of food at my place, the relatives, unaware of her antics, might offer to share their dishes, which would only give her an excuse to say, "Oh, I must have forgotten, silly me," and then, she'd likely whisper behind my back, "Sarah's so greedy." As I sipped my tea, anger bubbled inside me. I wanted her to admit her pettiness and apologize. Instead, she continued smirking, relishing my discomfort. Finally, I stood up. "Thank you for the meal. It seems I'm not considered family, so I'll be leaving now. Please, everyone, enjoy yourselves." The room fell silent. The relatives exchanged confused glances, whispering to each other. "What's going on? Is something wrong?" someone asked. Feigning innocence, my mother-in-law tilted her head. "Oh my, what's the matter, Sarah?" "There's no meal for me," I said plainly. Her face shifted to mock surprise. "Oh, dear, what should we do? How careless of me." "Come on, what are you talking about? You knew exactly what you were doing," I said, my voice cold. Calmly, she walked over with a tray. "Here it is. I just forgot to put it at your seat. No need to make such a fuss," she said with a smug smile. I looked down at the tray, and my stomach sank. It wasn't the steak and sides everyone else had. Instead, it was filled with egg salad, thick omelets, and pudding, all things I couldn't eat due to my egg allergy. My hands trembled. This was deliberate. Jake noticed and stepped in. "Mother, this is terrible. You know Sarah's allergic to eggs." Feigning shock, she gasped, "Oh my, I didn't order this. Could the restaurant have made a mistake?" I was seething but kept my composure. At that moment, my niece peeked at the egg-filled tray and exclaimed, "Can I have some?" The children at the table, not too fond of rare steak, eagerly traded their meat courses for the egg dishes. Now, in front of me was a plate of perfectly cooked steak and sides. "Well, then," I said with a smile, picking up my knife and fork, "thank you for the food." Before I could take a bite, my mother-in-law interjected, "Hold on, you must not know this, so let me teach you. Normally, daughters-in-law only eat the appetizers." Her words echoed through the room. I froze, my knife and fork still in hand. Finally, she had revealed her true colors. Taking advantage of the silence, she snatched the meat courses away from me and scolded, "And you shouldn't give your food to the children. They need to eat everything, including their steaks." Her malicious smile sent chills down my spine. The other daughters-in-law exchanged uneasy glances and began to apologize. "I'm sorry for eating the steak, even though I'm just the daughter-in-law. I'm sorry for drinking the soup, even though I'm just the daughter-in-law. And I'm sorry for eating the mashed potatoes, even though I'm just the daughter-in-law." The sight of them apologizing one after another shook the room. No, that's not what I meant," my mother-in-law stammered. "When I said daughter-in-law, I meant Sarah." The daughters-in-law looked at her coldly. "We're daughters-in-law too. Does that mean we're not recognized as family either?" My mother-in-law's face flushed as she struggled to explain. I took a deep breath and addressed the room. "Mother always serves me tea, nothing else, every single time we visit. It's because I'm not considered part of the family, but treating me like this, knowing I have an egg allergy, that's too much." The relatives began murmuring in disapproval. My mother-in-law's carefully crafted image started to crumble as she tried, and failed, to come up with an excuse. "Oh, I completely forgot about your allergy, Sarah. I could have sworn you liked eggs, but maybe I was mistaken," my mother-in-law stammered, her tone full of false innocence. "But you just said you didn't order this, didn't you?" I replied sharply, my frustration bubbling over. "Did I say that? Did I really?" she mumbled, her web of lies beginning to unravel. "You did this on purpose, didn't you? You've always been like this. My husband, Jake, interjected, his voice cold and steady. The accusation made her visibly pale. Stop it, Mom, this isn't right, Jake continued, his disappointment evident. It's not like that at all, she cried, desperately trying to deny her actions, but it was too late. The truth hung heavy in the room. So, you never really considered Sarah part of the family, Jake said, his voice, though calm, carried a weight that silenced everyone. Then I guess I'm not family either. Sorry for thinking I was all this time. Her face crumpled as her sons exchanged incredulous glances. Jake's brothers chimed in. Mom, what's going on? Are you harassing Sarah like this? One of them asked. No, it's just Sarah, she blurted out, a slip of the tongue that exposed her true intentions. Her panic was palpable. The relatives, sensing the shift in tone, began finishing their meals and quietly leaving the table. The daughters-in-law, one by one, placed money on the table as if signaling their resignation from the farce. My mother-in-law's demeanor crumbled further. I didn't mean for it to come out that way, she stammered, her voice trembling, but the damage was done. The egg courses sat untouched before me, their presence a silent reminder of her petty cruelty. I glanced at them, then at Jake, who gave me a small nod. I picked up my fork. This is delicious, I declared after taking a bite. The aroma of the omelette is irresistible. My voice was light, but my words carried weight. Sarah, stop eating that, my mother-in-law shrieked, trying to snatch the plate away. Jake grabbed her arm, his voice firm. Mom, you need to apologize for everything. If it wasn't Sarah, it could have been someone else, and they might not have stayed as strong. Her bitterness twisted her face, and she finally snapped. Yes, I knew about her allergy. I didn't like her. She took my last son away from me. The room fell silent, her confession echoing loudly. I wasn't ready to let him go, she continued, her voice cracking. I wanted him to stay here, with me, where I could take care of him. Jake's expression darkened. Mom, I'm 40 years old. What did you expect? For me to live here until I was 50, 60? Her protest was feeble, and any sympathy she might have garnered evaporated. The conversation was interrupted by a cheerful voice at the door. It was the delivery man, here to collect the trays. Oh, I didn't realize this was your house, he said to me, surprised. I thought it was just another delivery. I smiled politely. It's my in-laws' house, but I recognized your restaurant's dishes right away from the taste. I've been a frequent customer. My mother-in-law's confusion grew as she listened. Wait, what do you mean? She asked, her voice faltering. I said, meeting her gaze. I've been stopping by his restaurant because you never prepare food for me. The delivery man, oblivious to the tension, chuckled. Oh, so this is the famous mother-in-law I've heard about, the one who forgets her daughter-in-law's meals. Her face turned ashen. That's enough, she snapped, trying to shut the door on him, but the damage was already done. Jake sighed, looking at her with a mix of disappointment and resolve. Mom, you've always wanted us to come over, but I think it's best if we don't visit anymore. Don't say that, she cried, her voice desperate. Just come, even if it's only you. Jake shook his head. No, Mom, my wife is my family, and if she's not welcome, neither am I. Her protests faded into silence as we left the house together. From that day forward, Jake's brothers and their wives also began to distance themselves. It turned out they'd been mistreated in similar ways, but had remained silent out of fear or resignation. Despite her attempts to contact Jake secretly, he stood firm. Mom, I don't need your cooking anymore, and I won't be coming back for a while, he told her. Over time, the bonds between her and her family frayed, her actions leaving her isolated. Meanwhile, Jake and I looked forward to a brighter, happier chapter, one built on mutual respect, love, and, of course, delicious meals shared as a family.